Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for coming on 3 Books. And now all of us, let's head down to Midtown Manhattan and listen in. Here we go.
I've always been a big believer that your environment shapes your reality. The people you surround yourself with have the potential to massively level you up as an individual or to massively hold you back. If you can get into rooms where you're the dumbest person or the least successful person, good things start to happen if you do that consistently. I don't remember a damn thing that I learned in any of these classes. I don't remember a single book I read because I was figuring out how to skate by while playing baseball.
Now, what is your view on higher education? I mean,
higher education and just education in general had sort of like disenchanted me with reading a bit. Like everything being forced and you having to read certain things had led to me not wanting to read anything. Like I had retreated basically. I came to view doing an excellent job on something as the standard that my family believed in. For me personally, my goal and my vision for my own life is to impact 1 billion lives. I'm a big believer that you need time to actually think and ideate in order to create at a high level in any area. And most of us dedicate no time in our routines to thinking.
The passions of the smartest people in your circles are a looking glass into the future. This is what you wrote.
Yeah.
So what are your smart friends paying attention to today?
The idea that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion.
Yes.
So those time bounds that you put on things really level up your focus and your energy towards it. But I don't know anyone that wakes up at 4:45 and goes to the gym that is losing in life, because it just requires a certain level of discipline that you figure out a way to win. Like no one wakes up at 4:45 in the morning to watch Netflix. You wake up at 4:45 in the morning because you're going to do something productive, whether it's work out or whether it's do work or do on something.
There are no losers at the gym at 4:30 in the morning. What do you think, guys? Do you agree? Do you agree with Sahil Bloom on that statement? I don't know. I've never been to the gym at 4:30 in the morning, so I cannot confirm or deny, but it does sound plausible. I'm not sure if any gym I've ever been a member at is even open at 4:30 in the morning. Presumably, there are some 24-hour hardcore gyms, and maybe the most hardcore of hardcore people are there. That's just one out of a series of endless, unconventional, wisdom-distilling aphorisms from writer, thinker, and investor Sahil Bloom, who is at Sahil Bloom, SahilBloom, on all the social media where you can join millions of people, including me, who follow his like I said, wisdom distilling. He's looking at the world through a new and novel lens, helping us sift through the sea of self-help in a wonderful way. I really, really love his stuff. And we're going to get more into Sahil in just a second. But before we do, we always kick off 3 Books by sharing a letter, right? A review, a letter. Phoebe1207 dropped one in on Apple Podcasts US. She says, I've been listening to this show since 2018, and it is still the only podcast I will listen to without wanting to throw up. Okay. I took a break for a year or two thinking I didn't like podcasts at all, but then I gave it another try, catching up with the episodes I missed, and now I am a tried and true cover-to-cover club member. You can even call in, and I have a few times. Astounding. I learned so much every episode. Thank you, Phoebe1207. I appreciate that. For those that don't know, the Cover to Cover Club is anybody who self-identifies as listening or attempting to listen to every single chapter of 3 Books. There's only 333 of them. We drop them on the exact minute of every single full moon from 2018 all the way up to 2040, 333 lunar cycles. And there is a phone number. It is 1-833-READ-A-LOT. And at the end of every single show, we have a post-game, an after party, an end of the podcast club, and we play your phone calls, we read your letters, we hang out, we talk about the word of the chapter. It's just a fun way. I talk directly to you, you talk directly to me. So if you want to hear this chapter's phone call, just stick to the end of Sahil Bloom's conversation. Now, let's get back to Sahil here. It was just over a year ago, actually, about November 2022, when I saw this viral Twitter post everywhere, all about time management, everywhere. Like Mel Robbins, our guest back in chapter 88, she was posting about it on her Instagram, which is big news, right? She's got millions and millions of people following her, and I saw it there. And then friends were texting it to me, and it was a simple, tweet string. It just said, I recently came across data on who we spend our time with over the course of our lives. The insights are simultaneously inspiring and depressing. Here are 6 graphs everyone needs to see, : And there were subsequently, 6 tweets as promised. 4 graphs showed how time spent with family, friends, children, and coworkers all dramatically decline over our lives, right? While time spent alone and with partner skyrocket. But more important than the graphs, although the graphs themselves are powerful, were the fact that they were accompanied by these short, insightful takeaways from this guy I never heard of named Sahil Bloom. So I joined the millions, the legions of people following Sahil, and I realized the post wasn't like a one-off. It was just one in an endlessly scrolling series of wisdom distilling concepts, conjuring to mind people like that we've had on the show, like Tim Urban back in chapter 22, Mark Manson back in chapter 25, or Shane Parrish back in chapter 60. And basically what he was doing is he was tweaking the takeaways to like a maximum strength dosage and then dropping them into the doom scrolling cesspool that is your typical social media scroll, right? I mean, that's just what you go on social media, you end up feeling bad about yourself an hour later, you wish you'd read a book. That's what I do. And that's why I don't have any social media apps on my phone, not a single one. I have to like go into my computer, I have to log in, I have to like, type in my password because I make it hard because I don't like the way I feel afterwards. But then you got a guy like Sahil and I'm like, oh, I want to follow his content. So actually what I ended up doing was I signed up for his email newsletter, which is called the Curiosity Chronicle. I signed up and I like it when these emails pop into my inbox. I don't like too many emails in my inbox, but these ones are wonderful because they're basically like that wisdom distilling tweet string, but in written form. He might do one, kind of before the other and go back and forth, as you're going to hear. So I was excited when he announced that he landed a major book deal. I was going to try to time this conversation with the book deal, but the book's not coming out till I think Jan 2025. So we're like, I don't want to sit on this for a year and a half like we did with Susan Cain. You remember that, the 92nd Street Y, January before the pandemic, and we ended up hanging out with her like way after because the book Bittersweet didn't come out for after. So I was like, okay, I want to release this now, and I also want to like figure this guy out. I was super curious. I'm like, what makes this ultra high performing self-help superhero tick? Like, was it because he just grew up in like a brainy epicenter of the world? His dad is David E. Bloom, like multiple award-winning, American Academy of Science and Letters, Harvard distinguished professor, one of the greatest social science researchers in the world. Was it that? Was it his mom? Lakshmi Reddy Bloom, who he says is smarter than his dad. Was it the older sister who went off to Yale while Sahil was still like in high school? Was it that? Was it the fact that he ended up at Stanford on a varsity baseball scholarship? Was it the fact that he met Tim Cook at the local gym at, you guessed it, 4:30 in the morning? Like, what was it? What is the secret sauce? This guy's like in his early 30s, and yet he's hit on something that's really powerful. I know the book's going to be a massive bestseller when it comes up, and until then, you can just follow him anywhere and see that he's putting out this great content every single day. So I was like, I reached out to the guy. I fly down to New York City. I grab a plush purple velvet booth. He grabs it. We grab it in the corner of the Core Club, Core, the Core Club. One of these kind of like midtown Manhattan, like social clubs. You got to pay like, a really expensive 5 to 6 figure kind of initiation fee. And then you pay like an annual 5-figure, I'm assuming 4 or 5 figure dues per year to be part of like a community. It's an interesting concept. Maybe it's like a kind of like, we can talk about Soho Club and all these things. We did other interviews there, but it was like a really cool, interesting atmosphere. And I really believe that doing these interviews in person really lends themselves to a greater connection, deeper connection. And I feel like that comes through. I hope it does. But you're going to hear in the background, like, it was like, I don't know, 2 or 3 p.m. when we started, and it ended up close to dinner time when we were done. So you'll hear like the room gets a little bit busier. They're setting the tables. The glasses start to clink. They're seating people, 3-4 booths away from us or 3-4 seats away because they don't want to interrupt us. But at the same time, you can start to hear them whisper. I like that. But if you're in your car right now on a long drive and you're like, who's talking? That's just you hanging out with us. I'm in your left ear, Sahil's in your right. You're sitting on the chair between us, and yes, we had a chair sitting there, and we're going to sit down, and we're going to hang out and talk about Parkinson's Law. We're going to talk about cold plunges and what the hardest part of those really is. It's not what you think it is. We're going to talk about phone-free walks. We're going to talk about impacting 1 billion lives, posting kid photos online, Dunkin' Donuts, 5 a.m. writing blocks, Tim Ferriss, opportunity versus energy, Sahil's 3 most formative books, and much, much, much more. Stick around till the very end. We'll talk about my favorite quotes from the show. We'll hang out at the end of the podcast club. We'll play some phone calls and hang out a little bit longer. And until then, let's enjoy the wisdom distilling wisdom? No. Let's just enjoy the wise soul, the wise, loving, beautiful soul, putting himself out there so wonderfully in the world that is Sahil Bloom. Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for coming on 3 Books. And now all of us, let's head down to Midtown Manhattan and listen in. Here we go.
Check.
Yeah, that's good.
Awesome.
You're a big believer.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer in the ice bath. Personally, just because I've seen a ton of benefit from it in my own life, and I have no idea whether any of the purported health benefits are real. The brown fat, metabolism, immune system, all the things that people claim on the internet, or that maybe there's some research showing. I have no idea if any of that's real, but the mental benefit for me of doing something really challenging to start the day, and of the dopamine surge, which I think is now well researched enough that it's real. I definitely feel the difference. Like mornings when I get up and when I get it done and nail it early in the morning and then go off onto whatever my first priority task is, feel so different than mornings when, for whatever reason, I'm not able to do it or that I don't.
So you aim to when you get up, you aim to go into the ice bath within what, like a minute or two?
It's the first thing I do. Yeah, I mean, I get up. My alarm goes off at 4:30. And I get up out of bed and I go get in it. And, and there's a little bit of the mental bit. So it sits on the deck off of our master bedroom. So it's literally like right there.
Right.
Outside. And during the winter.
Would you leave like a bathing suit waiting?
Yeah. So I have a bathing suit sitting in the bathroom, master bathroom. And I go grab that.
I know you wear a bathing suit because you also
I do because I post it. Yeah, I can't go naked. It would be tough to go naked too, for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to get into on the podcast. No, I put that on, and then basically I go stand at the door that exits to the deck, and that early in the morning, it's pitch black. Now you get a hint of light maybe at that time of morning in the summer, but in the winter, there'd be like snow on the little deck, and it would be
ice probably
20 degrees out, 10 degrees out.
Isn't it like frozen over?
On the deck?
Well, I mean, the
water.
bath, the water.
No, so the one I have, it's called the Cold Plunge. You can look it up. I think it's like thecoldplunge.com or something. And it has, I'm not affiliated with them or anything, but they, this isn't an ad. I just have it. And it has a chiller, but the one that they recommend if you're in a cold climate, if you're going to have it outside, is it also has a heater on it. So if the water is going to go below freezing, it actually warms it up to keep it above.
Warms
because
up
if
to
it
like
freezes,
2 degrees or something.
It keeps
or Celsius,
it keeps it at 39 Fahrenheit.
Right.
So whatever that is, 3 degrees. And basically it keeps it at that perfect temperature and
That's
sort of,
and
sort of circulates the water and keeps it clean and everything. I mean, it's awesome. But the struggle is like, honestly, the hardest part of the whole experience is just opening the door to go out on the deck. It's not necessarily being in the water, like getting into the water. It's literally just the like convincing yourself to open the door. Because once you go out, then you're out, and you get, it's sort of a metaphor for life.
Once you're out, once you go out, you're out. Sort of a metaphor for life.
Yeah, the hardest part with any challenging action is just taking the first step. It's not, once you're in it, things get much easier, and then you have the momentum and you're like, feel good, you're doing the thing that you said you were going to do, but taking the first step to actually do it, like jumping into a cold lake, the hardest part is not being in the lake, it's jumping.
Yeah, the anticipation.
Yeah,
the anticipation. That is so interesting. Well, more to discuss there. We've opened up a couple doors on the 4:30 a.m. wake up, the ice bath, the daily routines. These are some topics I want to kind of open up more. But before that, just thank you so much for saying yes to coming on 3 Books. And we're sitting on a plush purple velvety like corner booth in front of a white linen tablecloth. There's like these, the flowers so fancy that you don't know what they are, kind of, and I'm sure they're real, kind of in this like nice little white vase. I've ordered myself a Paloma, which is some sort of non-alcoholic seed lip cocktail with grapefruit juice and a dried orange. And we're looking out over like a, right now, sparse dining room area onto like a leather kind of seating area, lounge area. There's a little bit of a deck, sort of ornate, not fancy ornate, but like ornate, like chandeliers and sort of wall. So where are we? Like, what is this place? Tell me more about where you've invited me.
So this is Core Club, which is a private, I don't know if they would want you to call it a social club, but it's a social club in New York City, midtown Manhattan. As far as I know, it's been around quite a while, although it's moving,
20 years or something.
Yeah, moving to a new location soon, actually, nearby, much like kind of bigger, better location as they've been pitching it, at least.
Top 4 floors of a building on 5th.
Yeah.
They said. I looked at the designs when I walked in.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be fantastic. But basically, when I moved to New York from California, which was summer of 2021, I wasn't going to have an office for the first time in my life. I'd quit my job. I was coming to New York to be an entrepreneur and go build my own things. And the big change there was honestly, like, I wasn't going to be in an office every day with a team and didn't have like a place. And I was trying to figure out something in the city that was going to be sort of a space that I could host things, meet interesting people, do work, frankly, just like have a gym, potentially, all these things. And I had lunch here with someone just coincidentally and started asking questions about it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. What is this place? How does it work? Because I in California, there's not really the like membership club community thing. There's the Battery
country
in San Francisco. Yeah, country clubs are the thing, like
tennis
golf
course,
clubs.
golf,
but
swimming.
I've never heard of the like city kind of club
urban
scene.
Just like
there's the Battery.
Scene.
The Battery in San Francisco is probably the closest that you can come and think of. But LA has a bunch of these, like the Bungalow, and there's a bunch. Soho House.
I've heard of Soho House. That one's more ubiquitous.
Soho House is like mass market now, right? Like these places. The challenge that they have is. The business case runs counter to like the actual experience case, and when I say that, what I mean is like the experience being really curated with the membership and keeping it small, and so it's not crowded all the time. All of those things are great for the experience, bad for the business, because what you really need as a business is like tons of members flowing through in and out. And so Soho House, when they wanted to become a public company and go do all these great
I didn't know they were
public.
They're
public now, I think. You need to jack up membership, and you need to lower the price, and you need to let more people in. And so Soho House, when it was first started, you actually couldn't get in if you were like in finance. It was artists, and that was like the whole vibe of it. Yeah, and it was supposed to be like this sort of vibey environment. And then it sort of lost that as they started trying to build a business around it. So it's the real challenge that these places have faced. And I think, now there's a bunch in New York that have sort of tried to counter that, like Zero Bond or Cipriani is the other one in New York. But this one sort of has I think it has more of like a high finance membership base as far as I can tell. It's in Midtown versus like being in sort of a cool area, quote unquote, in New York. But I've absolutely loved it. It's quiet. There's great people. It's like a very cordial, nice environment. People like chatting with each other.
Is it expensive?
It's not crazy. I mean, the initiation for young members is super reasonable. I'm, probably the youngest member by maybe like 5-ish, 10-ish years, maybe.
You're 32.
I'm 32, and when I was joining,
you're young relatively on almost everything that you're doing.
Maybe. But when I was joining, part of it was like we're hoping to start bringing some younger members into this because it's traditionally been sort of older, more successful finance folks, and finding someone like myself who was sort of came from a finance background, but then entrepreneurial and doing writing and these different things, I think was interesting to them. So it's much less expensive than like a fancy country club, put it that way. But there's, it's a traditional model. Like there's an initiation and then basically monthly dues. But for what I get out of it and for being able to use it whenever and host people and dinners, meals, the bar is great. Everyone, like the service here, the people are so friendly and interesting backgrounds and interesting folks that are members. It's been an amazing place.
I feel like I saw something on Twitter that you had posted once about like what rooms you're in. You had sort of used that as a bit of a. You had met some young guy who was coming up and talking to you and asking you like, "Hey, I don't know what I want to do in my life," and you're like, "If you're in rooms like this, you've got it already figured out." What's that metaphor that you use?
Yeah, I mean, I used to call it like the rooms razor, like as a heuristic for life, to just think about if you can get into rooms where you're the dumbest person or the least successful person, good things start to happen if you do that consistently. And I've always thought that was a good way to approach sort of progress and growth. It's like, don't put too much pressure on yourself, but just get into those rooms one way or another. And if you do that over and over and over again, and you start creating value for the people in some little way, and they want to keep you around or they want to have you around, then you can see a really great growth in your own life. And so I sort of felt that way about this place when I was joining, was like, oh, there's tons of interesting people, and the initiation or the monthly dues, it's sort of an investment in being in those rooms. And I've had that over and over again. Like, I mean, I've invested in companies where I think I'm probably going to lose my money on the investment in the company, but it got me to be able to go to their events that they host. And at those events, I've met a lot of interesting people that'll lead to really cool things.
Yeah.
And so I've thought about it now more broadly as like the return on your investment actually has to include any positive returns that come from it outside the financial ones.
Right. So there's social.
Yeah.
There's the financial returns. There's
Yeah.
social returns.
And it's like future financial returns that aren't directly tied to the investment in that company.
Hard to see from the
Yeah, but
point.
if you take a more broad-based view on what it looks like, right?
Yeah.
Like I recently there's this holding company that I invested in, which I actually now think will end up being a fantastic outcome financially. But when I did it, I invested $25,000 in this company. And I remember thinking like, I have no idea if this is a good investment or not, but I want to be around these guys because good things happen around these guys. I don't know how they do it, but they bring together great people. They're super smart. They somehow are like have this aura that's attracting amazing people and talent around them. And I want to be a part of that.
Yeah.
And so I would invest that to just be a part of that ecosystem. And that has paid off like tenfold.
Like
and the
what's an
people that I've
example?
met, they hosted an event in Miami recently that I got to go to as a shareholder of the thing. And I got to speak at it, and that led to a bunch of interesting relationships with people that were attendees that I got to spend time with over the course of these 2 days. And to me, that's going to be worth millions of dollars to me in the long run. These relationships, the people, the things we're all going to work on together. Now they're working on a deal that I'm somehow getting involved in. Like there's all this stuff that has sort of branched off of it, the value that it's created that wasn't necessarily the investment in their company,
Totally, yeah.
but it was the investment in the ecosystem and being there.
Yeah, our guest in chapter 38 of the show, Ryan Holiday, always talks about going to the Tim Ferriss OTK event or opening the kimono, this one-time, one-off, $10,000 a ticket. I'm making up the price, something ludicrously high event that Tim Ferriss hosted. And Ryan's like, I met my book agent there, my talent agent, my like all these relationships came out of like literally this one event that he as a young like 20-something year old sprung himself up to go to. So it's interesting. It's an interesting way to look at things. And
it's also just the principle of like if you're young and you reach out to someone that you really admire and they say like, yeah, I'm not doing phone calls, but like let me know if you're ever in LA. You get on a plane and fly to LA the next day and just say like, oh, I'll actually be there tomorrow.
Yeah. Here's the 20 days next month I'm there.
And it pays off. Like those kind of little things. You can lot like it's a white lie that you can tell like, oh yeah, I'm actually going to be there in person to see you tomorrow. Like would love to get together, whatever it might be. I recently did something like that with going to London. Like there was just someone that I wanted to spend time with and wanted to do it in person. I didn't want to do a Zoom. And so I just booked a ticket. I was like, hey, I'm going to be in London next week if you want to get together. And I ended up spending time together, building a great friendship that I think will, turn into a bunch of interesting things and an interesting connection for the long term.
I think this rooms metaphor is so heuristic. I want to use that word. That's the word. I'm trying to use that word more in my life.
It's a good word.
What's the definition of that?
I don't know. It's like a cut through the noise, like a shortcut, basically.
A model.
It's a shortcut. It's a way to cut through. It's a way to cut through the noise. Decision making.
It's interesting too, partly because of how you grew up. I mean, you were born in the Boston area.
New York.
You're born in New York.
Mount Sinai Hospital in New York.
Okay. Why do I think Boston?
I grew up in Boston.
Okay.
My dad was previously, so my dad was at Harvard most of his career, but prior to that, he was the chairman of the economics department at Columbia. So I grew up in first 5 years of my life was in faculty housing in the Upper West Side here.
And then moved to Boston.
He took a job at Harvard.
And he's a very prominent professor there.
Yeah.
David Bloom.
Yeah, he's been there a long time.
He's World Economic Forum councils. He's in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's a tenured professor at Harvard. And you grew up in this atmosphere.
Yeah.
But that's interesting to me about the rooms metaphor, therefore, because you kind of grew up in a room like that,
Yeah.
And yet you've been conscious of that metaphor in regards to other parts of your life. I wonder about that relationship.
Yeah, it's interesting. I never really thought, it's funny, like my dad,
I should say both your parents went to Princeton.
Yeah.
Your
my mom
is
is
no
actually
slouch.
smarter than my dad.
Your mom's she's had her own data coming for 16 years.
But it's funny. Like I never really thought of my dad as this intellectual giant that I now appreciate that he is. Because growing up, he was just my dad. He was the guy that like would come home from a long day at work and always have the energy to play catch with me and go outside and have dinner with us. And then I later realized that once I went to bed, he was staying up and working late on his various pieces of research, things he was working on. But at the time, he was just my dad. He was just the guy that I spent time around. And so I don't think it was until probably when he got inducted into the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and we went to his induction, and I sort of saw the respect that his colleagues had for him and the people that were there and how much they admired him, and some of his students came and were telling me how much they admired him, and it had just never clicked in my mind that my dad was like this really amazing person.
On Wikipedia, one of the world's foremost social scientists.
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty lofty.
Yeah, I mean, I think
title.
He probably has a chance at winning a Nobel Prize at some point in his life if he continues his research. He has been at the forefront of pushing forward health and wealth in developing nations. In particular, has been his like core area of research, and in particular around that, pushing this idea of the demographic dividend, which is the concept that when a population has a high working age to dependent age ratio, so a lot of sort of working age people versus the number of dependent age older people, they have an enormous opportunity to benefit in terms of their economic growth, because you have a lot of people working, not that many people that they're having to kind of serve and create value.
The ratio of number of people working to number of people they're taking care of,
exactly.
which includes kids, I'm assuming.
Exactly,
kids
yes.
and people that are out of the workforce on the high
mostly
end.
on the high end, but yes,
because the demographics are like, I'm one person, I'm taking care of 1.5,
exactly,
as opposed to taking care of 6
in
people.
A country experiencing rapid population growth, you go through a period where that ratio is very high, like India right now, or sub-Saharan Africa right now. And on the flip side of that is like Japan, which is experiencing the absolute reverse.
It's got so many old people, not enough young people
and
working.
Same with the U.S. will experience the same thing because not enough people are being born. And the ability to harness that for economic growth with sound policy and with, corruption removal practices and making sure that the economy can actually benefit from that during that period has been a real core area of his research as well.
Wow, so he was doing all of this, but when he'd come home, he'd be dad.
Yeah,
he would turn that because it wasn't until this later induction as you were growing up, and you didn't live right in Boston then.
No, we lived in a small town outside. Yeah,
and that's an interesting choice too, right? To be a professor at Harvard, you lived in a small town. I remember you saying I was this cocky high school kid. So you grew up in. It wasn't like you went to like a private school.
No, I went to a public school.
Yeah, so that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, it was. I mean, so I grew up in a small town that was, I think one of the big reasons we moved there was because it had like some of the top public school education in the country. I think it's fallen off a bit now, but at the time it was like
definitely
the top
looking at the
public school in the
ratios.
state. Yeah, no, I mean I think both my parents come from highly educated backgrounds, and both of them really. I mean, my mom is Indian, so Indian people really care about education, obviously. And so both my sister and
I got that on both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So both I have an older sister who was really the academic one and really like sort of the golden child, as it were.
Other than Yale.
But she, she kind of paved the way, but we both went to public school in this town, and I had a great academic experience, but just small town. It was like needed to sort of get punched in the face a little bit.
Needed to get punched in the face. That's something else we're going to come back to. I've heard you say it before. I needed to get punched in the face, and I was this cocky. I was also I love that you used the word because I'm an Indian kid. I grew up in a public school as well. I was also in a suburb. I was an hour east of Toronto, Oshawa and Whitby, and I knew no cocky Indian kids ever in my life. Those two words didn't go together. You're half.
Yeah.
So you got that. Maybe that's why. But I was like, I think of us. Me. I was like squirrely, quiet, shy, thick glasses, like super nerdy, like in the library. But you're like this, like varsity athlete.
Yeah.
You had the potential to be like the first Indian baseball player like ever. I saw that documentary when the two guys picked off like the Slumdog Millionaire show.
That was amazing.
Whatever that's called.
I forget, but that was amazing.
But they didn't make it to the majors.
No.
You were gonna. There's
cool,
no
though.
Indian players.
Yeah.
You were
it's
there.
Very rare. It's very rare. It's very rare that you see Indian kids in college even. I might have been the only one in the Pac-12 when I was playing in college.
Only Indian athlete.
Yeah, only Indian baseball player in the Pac-12 for sure. I don't recall seeing a single other Indian kid on another team. Maybe there were some that were half like me, and I just didn't pick it up in their name. But I didn't see any other Sahils in college baseball. But
Yeah, exactly. No Sachins.
Exactly.
Not many.
Very few. A lot of cricket, so there is some overlap. But my grandfather on my mom's side was a state cricket player in India. So I think I probably picked some of it up from there. And then my dad was, at least he claims, a very good stickball player on the streets in the Bronx growing up. Yeah. I used to play in the streets. So the cockiness definitely came from the athletic side.
Big fish, small pond.
Yeah, big fish, small pond, but more so. I mean, I was just like, I was good at baseball at a young age. I was like really good in Little League. Then I was sort of like okay as I went through puberty. I hadn't figured it out yet. Hadn't grown a lot. I sort of blossomed late. And then I got into high school and I had a really good freshman year. Like I made the varsity team as a freshman, had a good year. Sophomore year, I was even better. And it was really after sophomore year that I sort of matured physically. All of a sudden started having a lot of, recruiters knock on the door and grew a bunch, like started lifting, got bigger. And that was when I started just like going down a path of just being that like kind of cocky, arrogant, like just not aligned with sort of what I feel like my core values are.
Interesting. It must be interesting for your parents too, coming from this deeply academic background. Like, I'm assuming did they meet at Princeton?
My parents met at Princeton. They overlapped over like a 2-week period at Princeton. My dad was finishing his PhD there. My mom was working in the library prior to starting her master's.
Okay.
Yeah.
And dad grew up in the Bronx.
Yeah.
Dad
Jewish, grew up in the Bronx. Mom, from India, had come over in 1978 to do her college degree at Mount Holyoke. And they met in 1980 at Princeton.
Interesting. But then they got this athlete suddenly on their hands. Yeah. But still, somehow the path leads to Stanford. So we'll have this. I'm curious also, what I'm kind of asking about is your thought or your relationship with higher education, because there's going to be kids listening to this. Of course, the show is geared towards book lovers, writers, makers, sellers, and librarians. But people listening, they look at you as a sort of paragon of success. You've done a lot in such a young age. Now, what is your view on higher education? I mean, coming from the sort of gilded Ivy League kind of lineage, and I went to Harvard too, in my for my master's, so I can kind of poke. I feel like I could poke my head in that door as well. Yeah. But what role do you think higher education kind of has had, and what do you think it will have?
Yeah. I mean, there was I would say, standard of excellence academically in my family that I found for many years of my life very, very difficult to stand up to. My older sister, who I mentioned, was really the golden child. Yeah. I was 4 years in school younger than her, about 3.5 years in age. And she was like, she still to this day has the highest GPA in our high school's history, far as I know. Like, got into every school she applied to, Sonali. Yeah. And that in many ways is like what my parents expected of us, right? It was like, my mom is Indian. From my grandfather on my mom's side was a famous chemist in India, like, won the Volvo Environmental Prize, like really famous, well-known chemist. My dad obviously was an academic, and so academics were so central to our family. Sports didn't really make sense. Like, neither one of my parents were really athletes on any level, and so my sister was like, that was the path that I was expected to follow. I would go to every class, and the teacher would say, "Oh, you're Sonali's brother," and I would say, "Yeah," and then by like week 1 or week 2, they would be really disappointed in me because I wasn't living up to whatever. I was screwing around with my friends. I liked playing sports. I was like goofing off, and it wasn't because I wasn't smart. It was because I just had sort of a different, mental frame of mind of how I wanted to approach things and what I was doing. And that was tough for me for many years. And I think I sort of rebelled against the map that was set out for me by screwing around even more. And by just like, I can get B pluses, A minuses by doing basically no work and putting in no effort. So I'm just going to do that. And I remember so distinctly, like my freshman year of high school, I got a B plus in honors physics. And like my sister had never seen a B plus in her entire life, right? So like my parents didn't even know what to do. And my mom had this conversation with me like, "Oh, you're not going to get it. Your sister got into all these schools. You just got a B plus in this class. you're not going to get into those places. They don't take people that get B pluses. That's average. You're not going to get in there. And I said to her, I was like, look, Mom, I have to figure it out for myself. I was like, that may be true, but I just need to figure out my own way. I need to figure it out for myself. And she says in hindsight, that was such a powerful moment as a parent with their kid for someone to say that to you when I was 14 years old. But I did find my own way. I figured out that like I could throw this little white thing harder than most other people. And that if I really dedicated all my energy into that, I was able to get a scholarship and sort of bypass the whole like academic restrictions of getting into Stanford and figure out my own way there.
Sports was your vehicle into there.
Yeah. I mean, I ended up getting a scholarship. My junior year of high school, I got the offer and accepted it. And I didn't have the grades to get in there standalone. I mean, I did okay. I did well. By any normal standards, I did well, but not remotely close to what my parents would have expected academically, and not remotely close to what Stanford would accept, I think, on a normal course application.
But they wanted a good pitcher.
Yeah, I was good. I mean, I was good enough at least, to make the case.
And do you think that you have a child?
Yeah,
Roman.
Yeah,
I see him all over social media.
He's
beautiful,
more famous than me.
beautiful child. And will you bend towards going to a fancy school? Like, will that be a value that you teach and impart and think is important? Like,
I have a really hard time remotely predicting what his education will look like, because it's changed. It's changed so much from 10 years ago to now.
Yeah.
And imagining now with AI, with all the things that have advanced in technology, what it'll look like by the time he's of an age where he can go to school. I mean, I don't even know what his primary school education is going to look like, let alone his secondary. And so for me, I mean, when I reflect on my own education experience, it had nothing to do with the classroom. It was all about growing up as a human being and having to live on my own for the first time, being away from my parents, having to create my own social structures and circles, create my own maps for what the world looked like, for the things I cared about, get knocked down, figure out how to have resilience outside of your home. Those are the things that I reflect on and say, that's what made me who I am today. I don't remember a damn thing that I learned in any of these classes. I don't remember a single book I read because I was figuring out how to skate by while playing baseball.
Except one.
What's that?
The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss, which I think you read at Stanford.
I did read for the first time in college. I think it came out in 2009?
2007.
2007 it came out?
Yeah.
Okay. I read it
there when you were there? Or?
Yeah. I read it in, probably like my junior year of college. That was 2012.
Junior year of college. So let me just say for people who are following along. So We've got Sahil sitting in front of us here at the Core Club in New York. He grew up with a Jewish father, grew up playing stickball in the Bronx, Indian mother, who came over for college, stuck around, met this wonderful guy. They have him. They move to Boston. He grows up there, becomes an athlete. He goes over to Stanford, and at some point in the 4 years there, 4 years?
Yeah, 5 years actually.
5 years.
In the
Did
end.
another degree.
I did my master's.
Did another degree. He reads The 4-Hour Workweek. So for people, listen, this book was originally published in 2007 by Harmony Books. The cover is the very famous brown silhouette of two palm trees with someone lying in a hammock between them, set on a white background with this sort of like, I don't know what the font's like a stencil-y kind of wobbly font. And there's this really famous subheadline, Escape 9 to 5, Live Anywhere and Join the New Rich. The cover blurb says, from mini retirements to outsourcing your life, it's all here. Whether you're a wage slave or a Fortune 500 CEO, this book will change your life. From Phil Town, author of a book called Rule Number 1. Tim Ferriss is the American entrepreneur, investor, author, podcaster, and lifestyle guru. Born in 1977. Currently 45 years old, host, of course, of the Tim Ferriss Show and many other things. And this really is meant to be a book where Tim, spends 5 years learning the secrets of the new rich, a fast-growing subculture who has abandoned the deferred life plan and instead mastered the new currencies of time and mobility to create luxury lifestyles in the here and now. Whether you are an overworked employee or an entrepreneur trapped in your own business, this book is the compass for a new and revolutionary world. Dewey Decimal Heads, you can follow this one under 650.1 for personal success in business. Sahil, tell us about your relationship with The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
So I first came across this book in my junior year at Stanford.
That's third year, right?
Third year, yes. Third year. So I was, give or take 21 years old at the time. And it was the first time in my life that I had started to have to think about what a life after baseball would look like. I had previously always assumed that I was going to go play professionally. I thought, you're sort of delusional a little bit when you're a kid and you think you're going to make a whole career out of this in life. You're going to make a ton of money. And then I actually started getting quite good to the point where I might not have thought I was going to make an entire life out of it and make enough money to be one of these rich, famous athletes. But I figured I would have a chance to at least play for a few years and that I could kind of defer having to think about getting a real job. Unfortunately, my arm really started to hurt that year. And what I noticed was, like, as my arm was hurting more, my velocity was sort of on a decline. It was like an inverse relationship.
Any
between
reason
the pain
why
in my arm
that you know of?
I had an injury. My shoulder was hurt. And I was pitching quite well, actually, and I was doing well, but the metrics around how I was pitching well were not pretty, and they were not conducive to having a long-standing career doing this. And so for the first time in my entire life...
Velocity going from what to what here?
At my peak, baseball. I was probably throwing up to 94 miles an hour.
Okay, that's fast.
And, consistently 89 to 92 miles an hour. I was throwing hard. I was doing well. It's not super hard by major league standards today, but it was hard at the time, actually, especially because velocities have gone very steadily up since then. And it went, down to 84, 85. I was throwing significantly slower.
And people could hit your pitches now.
I was still actually pitching quite well. I had figured out how to be crafty, and I was still pitching really well. And as my velocity declined, my movement actually increased. And so it was I was probably performing just as well. But major league scouts don't take notice of someone throwing 84, 85, even if you're doing well. Yeah. You have to be throwing at
you're the B plus of the baseball.
Yeah, exactly. You have to be throwing 90. And so for the first time in my life, I'd started to have to think about a life, what looked like after baseball. And I had a friend who basically had said, dude, you have to read this book. And I just listened to it on audiobook, and it's crazy.
You weren't really
totally
reading
different.
much at the time.
No, I wasn't. I mean, higher education, we talked about, higher education and just education in general had sort of disenchanted me with reading a bit. Everything being forced and you having to read certain things had led to me not wanting to read anything. I had retreated basically from having a love of reading.
I can completely relate to that.
I loved reading when I was a kid. From when I was maybe 8 until I was 13, 14, I was an avid reader. I mean, every car ride, everything, I always had books. I was reading tons of stuff. And it was just things that I chose to read. It was things I picked up that I loved. But then when you started getting forced in high school to read certain things, I totally lost my love for it. And so that had kind of gone away. But he said, you're going to love it. You figure out, you don't have to work a normal job. You can do these things. And I hadn't thought about any of it. And so when I picked up the book...
Audiobook.
I actually bought the real book because I hadn't really experienced audiobooks yet. And so I was I'm going to read it. And I remember reading it and the ideas basically just bouncing off me throughout. And partially in hindsight, I can say that, but also at the moment. I remember reading it and being oh, this is interesting, but having no actionable takeaways on, okay, what do I do with this information? I just got a bunch of information. I want to go act on it and go do something. I had none of that. It was basically oh, that's neat. You can work from anywhere and live all over the world and do these things.
Come up with a muse.
Yeah, but partially because I didn't have a desire to do that necessarily. I had traveled a lot growing up by the nature of my dad's work. He did a lot of work in the developing world and really all around the world. And I had gotten to go to a lot of those things, and so I had experienced a lot of the world. I wasn't a kid who had been stuck in his hometown his entire life, and so I had really seen the world. I also had a long-term girlfriend that I was excited to live with for the first time, and I didn't necessarily want to go pick up and be moving all over the place. I also didn't have experience with the internet, really. It's crazy because I was at Stanford. You'd think tech
but
world,
it's still 11 years
it.
ago, right?
But I just didn't have experience with, a lot of the ideas in the 4-hour work week were all around building an e-commerce business or building an online business. Yeah, and having virtual assistants and being able to travel, and Tim's experience with doing that and with his first business. And I just didn't have, there was no frame of reference. There was no potential for those ideas to connect and mingle in my mind. And so I remember it just all sort of bouncing off me. And it's an interesting story now in the trajectory of my life because I came back to the book, what ended up being almost 10 years later, 8 years later, and felt like it really changed my world and how I thought about everything. So it's sort of a funny life arc because I read it, and it sort of speaks to the fact that it's not just the content, but it's the timing of when it hits you that can be potentially transformative with a book.
So what did it change back in junior year, though? You read this in third year. Yeah, you're reading all these ideas hit you, but you had some resistance too because you didn't have the inclination to travel all over the world. You had the steady girlfriend that you wanted to settle down with. So did it alter anything at that time, or just sort of sit inside you for a bit?
The only thing it altered in me was that it re-sparked my interest in reading. It didn't.
That's huge.
The ideas themselves literally changed nothing because I had there was no frame that I could use them in and actually leverage them. But to the point earlier of like opening the door is the hardest part of getting into the cold plunge. That's what it was for me, and rediscovering my interest in reading. For the first time I was like, oh, I just read that book. Okay, I didn't really get much out of it, but like it was cool. I got through this book and I can talk to people about it. That was neat.
It's an electric book. Books.
Yeah, I mean, it's the
density and concentration of ideas, and just Tim is being so similar to you.
And just a very different book. Like it doesn't read like a normal book. There's all the inserts and all the different breakdowns and things that are so tactical. And I have this theory about nonfiction books in general that like if you take 100 nonfiction books that have performed extremely well, sold 500,000 plus copies, whatever the number is, I have a theory that basically like 95 of them are not really novel ideas. They're basically something that has been said a ton of times before that's said slightly better or in a more beautiful package slightly differently. So like Atomic Habits is a perfect example of that. I think James would say this. James is great. He's fantastic. He's a friend. James would tell you like there's hundreds of books on habits that have been written prior to that one. But he delivered something in a slightly nicer framework, more tactical, with more capacity for the audience to take
it. That 1% graph everybody loves.
Yeah, more capacity for someone to take it and act on it.
Yeah.
The other 5 books, if that was the 95, the other 5 books are truly just wild, novel, crazy, hit you in the face with how different they are. 4 Hour Workweek to me is like firmly within that 5.
Interesting.
It is just so different. And the idea of digital nomad and traveling the world while working, if that came out in 2020, people would have been like, obviously you can do that. And it probably would have sold 10 times as many copies. It was like almost too early for its time.
2007.
Because no one was thinking about this. It was crazy. Like,
you
have to be in an office, dude. You have to be in an office. That's nuts. What do you mean you're going to go do this? Like, you were a crazy person. And Tim, probably people thought that. Like, you're nuts. He comes off as like an eccentric when you read that in 2007. In 2020, you look at it and you say, like, I mean, that book probably sells 5 million. I don't know how many it sold. I think it sold a close to a million.
Yeah, no way. Huge, like, massive.
I think if you include Audible and stuff, I looked at it once, but I think it's like
at least 5 or 10 million copies.
No, nowhere close.
4 Hour Workweek?
No, I don't think anywhere close.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's significantly less than Atomic Habits.
Really?
Over a million for sure, but not like 5-10. I don't think.
Oh wow! I thought it was way bigger.
No. I'm fairly certain of this. Maybe there's a way to confirm. I actually don't know, but I think order of magnitude like in the low millions versus like 10 plus, which is what I would have expected actually if you had told me, because of the impact I feel like it's had on the zeitgeist. But I honestly think it was an interesting case study of like the book came out in 2007 when it was really crazy, but if it came out in 2021 you would have said like, oh my god, this is blindingly obvious, and he delivered it in a beautiful package. So it's a fascinating thing.
Well, it's really fascinating for many things. Tim is a really interesting guy.
Have you had him on? Do you know him?
No, I'd love to. I've pitched him over Twitter, but I haven't landed. He's been he's one of the most requested guests.
He would be a fantastic guest for sure.
I know, and
maybe you can, on the back of having his book cited, use this as like a jumping point.
You're going to help me with this.
I'll shoot him a note. I'm happy to. I don't know if he'll take me up on it, but
well, I also said to him, the formative books he's mentioned many times, like Walden, and he's mentioned like this other book he always talks about. That he traveled with when he went to, he's always talking about taking 2 books with him. Walden was one of them. The other one is like, no one's ever talked about those on the show, so we got them open for him. But I want to ask you about ego. Ego is interesting to me because Tim is famous for many things, but he's also like, for example, he's really helped popularize Stoic philosophy, and he's also been a pretty adroit marketer. Like he's got the Tim Ferriss show. He's got his face on the cover. He's got Tim Ferriss Experiment. That was like this TV show he did. His face on the cover. And so I'm kind of curious, like, what is the role of ego in all of this? How do you think about like both feeding it and calming it? Like, what's your system for balance? You mentioned James Clear. Like James Clear has said, I've seen him say on Twitter, like, you want to be famous like Chanel. He said, like, where, you know, everyone knows your name, but nobody knows your face. And his face is not on all of this stuff. You know, he's got like a picture of like a distant silhouette on like a mountain is like his icon for everything. And so I've always been curious, like, how do you figure out where you, the icon, sits amongst, you know, the business, and how do you balance that?
I think it's different strokes for different folks. It's like the way I would put it around this. I mean, I obviously lean heavily to being at the center of things that I put out. I share a lot of personal things about myself, about my family, pictures, videos, all sorts of things like that.
Vacuuming with your kid yesterday on Sunday, in 4:50 a.m. this morning, the six pack is rippling. You're in the ice. You're in the ice bath. You're doing a selfie and you're talking to people. 450,000 people are listening to you. Like they're getting their Monday morning. You're really helping people.
I hope so. I mean, my opinion is you have to figure out A, what you want. Like, what are you trying to actually create? And B, what are you comfortable sharing in order to do that? For me personally, my goal and my vision for my own life is to impact 1 billion lives, like, you know, hundreds of millions, 1 billion lives. And I think that human connection is going to be a huge part of that for me. And human connection, to me, requires a face, and to be able to actually see someone and feel like you can connect with them on a deeper level. I was talking to a Hollywood producer earlier today, actually, and he said something really interesting, which is in the world of Hollywood, they have this concept that when you try to go really broad with this idea that'll reach everyone and connect with everyone, you actually connect with no one. And the way to connect with people on an incredible scale is to be very specific and to give them like a specific example of a single person. And that's how you connect. And so there's this sort of paradox that when you try to go broad and connect with everyone, you connect with no one.
Right.
My take on that is, I mean, A, I agree with it. And B is, I need to give people my specific experience with these things that I'm talking about, writing about, and struggling with, because that's my way to really connect with people. My pieces that have resonated most of writing have always been things that I am personally wrestling with, my own experience with them, because people, when they read those things, they might not connect with that specific instance, but they can see themselves in it in some way, shape, or form. And so when I'm sharing things and putting myself at the center of them, or putting my face, my family, whatever it is, I'm trying to create that human connection with people. I want to build a community, and I want people to feel impacted on a deeper level than just reading some piece of writing that has no one behind it. An example of that is sharing my experience with the decision my wife and I made to move back to the East Coast. I had a conversation with a friend in May 2021 that completely changed my life.
So flash forward, you graduate from Stanford, you do a master's degree in Stanford, you go into private equity, you're working on the West Coast, long hours, and 2021 comes.
Now, I had spent the first 7 years of my career basically pursuing this like well-trodden default path to quote unquote success, which was making a lot of money. That's what I thought success was. And, I saw my parents maybe once a year, especially once COVID started. It's going to be about once a year. And I had a conversation with a friend, and he asked how often I saw my parents. And I said, once a year. He said, how old are they? I said, 65. And he said, okay, you're going to see them 15 more times before they die. And, that's been a topic area that's been talked about. Tim Urban, an amazing writer, wrote The Tail End, which is this incredible blog
Former
piece.
guest of the show.
Oh, okay, great. So Tim's a close friend and amazing thinker and reader and writer as well. And, that comment, which I assume was sparked by either Tim's writing or Jesse Itzler has talked about it in the past.
The article's called The Tail End.
Fantastic article. One of the best ever. Sparked a massive change in my life. I mean, the next morning I told my wife that I wanted to move back to the East Coast, and we sold our house in California and bought a house on the East Coast. I quit my job in the span of 45 days. And me telling that story of the specific way that this impacted my life and how we actually made a change as a result of it has led to countless messages from people telling me how that thread or that newsletter article that I wrote caused them to do something similar. And I am blown away by that. Like something that I wrote. I'm a random guy, right? Like 2 years ago, I was literally a random guy. I was just working in finance. I was doing something random. And I created a legitimate impact in people's life to make a change to go live closer to people that they care about. There was a guy that reached out to me recently that said, after reading that, he moved back closer to live with his family. Spent like 6 months close to his family, spending tons of time with his mom. His mom was then diagnosed with cancer and died 6 months later. And he wrote to me and said how impactful it was, the fact that he had gotten to be there during that 6 months while she was still healthy as well as the months when she was sick and declining, and how much it meant to him to have been able to enjoy those memories when she was still well.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I'm sitting there. I mean, it knocks me off my feet to be able to have an impact like that with my one specific story of just sharing genuinely that you can create that sort of tangible connection with someone. And to route it back to your original point, I think being who I am and having a face connected to it is really central to being able to do that.
And how do you, I agree. And as a viewer and consumer and kind of reader of your stuff, I do like having a face in my inbox, and I feel like I'm part of your life. That is, and at the same time, I have some sort of weird resistance on myself to sharing my own life. Like I don't post Instagram stories really at all. I don't show my house. There's parts of my life I don't share, and I'm wondering why that is. And I think part of it is that because maybe I'm just generationally a little bit older, but a part of it's also like there's people like, what is your wife? How do you talk about this with your wife and your parents and your kid? Like, you know that famous story in Europe about kids like suing their parents now?
No.
Because now that they hit 18, they're like suing their parents because they've been shared over Facebook, and they're like, I didn't approve.
I'm definitely getting sued.
Yeah, exactly.
Roman's gonna sue me. Yeah, there's trade-offs. It's like everything else in the world, right? There's no perfect route, and there, if the path is to not share any of your face and do that, I think, the trade-off there for me personally would be that I wouldn't be able to connect with people in such a deep way. The trade-off to what I'm doing is that you're exposing certain things in a way that puts you at risk in a lot of ways, right? Whether it's relationships, close relationships, and people being impacted.
You'll be recognized.
Yeah, I get recognized a fair amount now. And people know my son's name, and people know what my wife looks like. And there's a discomfort that I think a lot of people have with that. I take solace in the fact that 99.99% of the content I put out is extraordinarily positive. I mean, flowery, right? Like, you don't see me talking crap to people on the internet. You don't see me dunking on people. You don't see me waging, wars around politics or social issues. What I'm putting out is like very much things that I'm wrestling with on my life journey. And I don't wade into waters that I don't feel comfortable wading into. And a big part of that is because I don't want negativity coming into my world. I don't want crazy people getting angry at me for certain things that I say or do. And so that's how I think I like mitigate or hedge the risk, I would say. But there's always risk associated with these things.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, Pete Holmes, I think it was chapter 45 of the show. He said it's, I think of it like it turns the world into a small town. That was his heuristic for it. Everywhere I go, if I get recognized, it's like I live in a small town. Yeah, that was a nice way a positive bent on that type of recognition.
I haven't had the like negative in-person interaction. People have come up to me a lot and said nice things about things they read or whatever they come up with, and
they've chosen to
exactly. And again, like. I have plenty of friends on Twitter who say tons of controversial things in order to get engagement and in order to, go viral or whatever it is. I've never done that once, and I don't intend to. And that's a big reason is because I do have everything out there. Like my family's all out there.
That President of the United States door open.
Yeah, you got to leave the door open.
I heard you on the My First Million podcast.
They keep pushing me on that. Other people try to push me on that. Elected office sounds like the worst possible job in the world to me. But
you're having such big influence outside of that.
I think you can create a much greater impact not running. I tend to think, like when you talk about ego, I personally think that 99% of running for elected office is to just build your ego.
Right. Well, certainly has we've seen that around the world a lot.
Yeah.
And here's another question. Daily routine. So you and Tim are both ludicrously high performing. You got both quantity and quality. I mean, it's like regular high quality podcasts, regular high quality articles, regular emails to I think you're like 500,000 people. He's got millions of people. And you speak a lot, both of you, about routines. So I know we're recording this spring 2023. It'll probably come out in fall 2023. What's your current? Your current, as of today, I know it's changing and evolving and dynamic. Yeah. What's your current routine?
Yeah.
What are the elements that are consistent for you? We've already heard about the ice bath.
Yeah.
That's how we opened.
Yeah. Up at 4:30, ice bath.
Why can I ask why 4:30? There's something about that time that sounds shocking just right off the face of it.
I mean, I used to get up when I first started working. I'd get up at 3:45, and I needed to be at the gym. So when I got my first job, I was working in finance, and I knew I wanted to maintain my working out habit because that had been something that I had just grown to love during my baseball years. I was like, I still need to go work out, but I know I'm going to have late nights in the office. I'm not going to be able to do it then. So I have to go early. And so if I wanted to be in the office by 6:30, because I wanted to be the first one in, that meant that I had to get to the gym by 5. And so that meant waking up at 3:45 to sort of like get my body awake, be awake, and then go hit the gym by 5.
But you had to be awake an hour and 15 minutes before you went to the gym?
Yeah, I like to like wake up, drink a coffee, you know, sort of like be primed in a mental state, ready to roll. And, you know, I'd have to leave my place by like 4:35.
This is in the Bay Area?
Yeah, I lived in Palo Alto, and I was going to go work out at the Equinox in Palo Alto. And so I started doing that, and that became a habit. I was like waking up at 3:45, and at the time I was going to bed at like 10:30. I mean, I was really getting no sleep, and it was like my hustle culture days, right? I was like, sleep when I'm dead, right? This will be fine. I'll be all right. And when you're 22,
as
you
Tim
kind
Urban
of
says, awake is interesting, sleep is boring.
Yeah, and when you're 22, you can sort of get away with that. Like I actually did feel pretty good for like a number of years, sleeping 5 hours a night. I could kind of get away with it. Now I can't, but at the time, that was the routine that I got into, and it just so happened that that crew of people that was at the gym at 4:45 or 5 every morning was like an amazing group of people that I got to be around and learn from, and some mentors that have been mentors for life, like
including Apple CEO Tim Cook.
Yeah, including Tim, who's been an incredible mentor and friend.
We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, and
you met him at the gym at 4:45.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he was one of that small crew, and it does go to say that like no one that is a loser, quote unquote, is going to the gym at 4:45 in the morning at a nice gym, and it's just like you don't wake up that early.
No losers are at the gym at 4:45. Okay, that's a good one.
No, I mean you don't. Yeah. Everyone's like, well, if you like waking up early is stupid. You don't need to do that. I was like, that's fine, but I don't know anyone that wakes up at 4:45 and goes to the gym that is losing in life, because it just requires a certain level of discipline that you figure out a way to win. Like no one wakes up at 4:45 in the morning to watch Netflix. You wake up at 4:45 in the morning because you're going to do something productive, whether it's work out or whether it's do on something.
So in your 20s,
you want to stay up late
in your 20s with
Netflix,
the PE
you're not
job,
waking up.
Okay. I like that adage. That's a good heuristic. No losers at the gym early. That is true. I mean, it makes sense. I can't experience this firsthand, but I understand this. But that was when you were in your 20s. And now you're in your 30s. You don't
so
work.
I've softened. 4:30.
Yeah. So it's. But why? So what time are you going to bed?
8:30.
That's like a hard. It's a hard.
I try to be asleep by.
Do you have a thing on your phone like that dings at 8:15 to brush your teeth?
No, I mean I just get into bed at I get into bed probably at like 7:30 and read and relax.
Oh, 7:30.
Yeah, I'm in bed super early.
And the kid here is not
grandpa.
affecting things, and then
he goes to bed then. So it's perfect.
Oh,
like my wife and I go to bed super early.
And it sounds like this child is currently sleeping through the night.
Yeah, he probably sleeps realistically from 7:30 to like 6.
Okay. So on the daily routine, it kicks off with this 4:30 a.m. alarm, which your wife does not wake up at.
No, I have it like very, very soft in the bathroom, so I have to get up to turn it off, but it's pretty quiet. Wow. Yeah, so that's a hack. It's a huge life hack because you can't snooze an alarm that's in the bathroom.
So it's an alarm clock.
Yeah, well, it's my phone. But you can, so my phone's not next to me.
Good. Okay,
and
we got that.
then it sits in the bathroom. And by the time you get up to go turn it off, you're not going to go back to bed. Yeah, it's like whatever the yeah, exactly. But you're never going to go back to bed after you get up to go turn an alarm off. And like it's easy to snooze when it's right next to you. You just press the button and you fall back asleep. But if you have to wake up, walk somewhere, and then come back, you're just not going to do it. By that point, you're up.
The supplemental hack, which I'm hearing, which I'm liking, is at a volume that's loud enough for you to hear, but not loud enough for your wife to hear.
Well, your mind, it's a weird thing with your brain, but basically, like, the alarm's going off early. You hear it, even though it's, like, not super audible. So it can be, like, very, very quiet. You could still hear it.
Okay, and baked into that also is this, it sounds like 8 hours or
close try to get 8 hours a night, like, at all times. Like if I go to bed, we're going out to dinner after this. If I end up falling asleep at 9:30, I try not to be a hard ass about still waking up at 4:30. Like I'll sleep until 5:30 if I need to make sure I'm getting 7 to 8 hours at least.
Interesting. So you wake up at 4:30. We got the ice bath. How long in this ice bath here?
3 to 5 minutes, depending on the morning.
That's the first thing you do.
Yeah.
3 to 5 minutes in the ice bath.
Yeah.
And is there a reason for the 3 to 5?
No, I mean, three minutes would get me to 21 minutes a week. They say that like anything over 11 is good. 3 minutes is like when it becomes
I've heard
hard.
Andrew Huberman say that.
3 minutes is when it becomes difficult. Is the real reason. Like going in for a minute, you're like, okay, I just got in and now I'm getting out. 2 minutes is like, it's starting to feel cold. Usually the like second to third minute is when you start to feel like a little.
And there's
shivery.
no hot before or after here.
There's
no sauna involved.
During the winter, I took a hot shower after because it's just like I would be freezing all day. Like I would never stop shivering basically during the day in the winter. So I needed to take a warm shower.
3 to
afterwards.
5 minute cold plunge.
Yeah.
Then what happens? And are you putting your head under too?
Yeah. I go. I mean, so when I get in, I go full dunk underneath to just like fully experience.
I'm loving
it,
this. This is great. But so far nothing you ingested. There's no supplements here, no pills, no vitamins, nothing
not
yet. Okay, now what?
Yeah.
Now we're at like what, 4:45?
Yeah, 4:45. I go downstairs. This is when my supplement gets ingested. So I've basically every day for the last 10 years been taking athletic greens. I think they call it AG1 now.
Yeah.
Actually, Tim was the first time. So
For Our Body, he talks about and did not get paid to do so.
No, but I had
says.
met and become friends with, and again, this isn't an ad. I had met and become friends with the founder of Athletic Greens back because he trained at my same gym.
No way. The
2011.
The early morning club?
No. This is 2011. I'm in college, and he came and trained at the gym where I was training for baseball. He was recovering from a back injury, and he was training there. My trainer has become a very famous guy at this point, and he's even more famous now. But I was his first client, so it was like this small gym. Eric Cressy is his name. He's the performance coach for the Yankees now, so he's big deal. He was just on Tim Ferriss's podcast actually last week. So I meet the CEO of Athletic Greens when he's just starting it. He like just created the packets and everything. And so he gives me some. I've been getting sick a lot at school, and I started taking it, and I basically never got sick again. And so since then, I've just
heard you
taken
say this.
it
I
every
want
single
to
day.
ask this one more time.
Yeah.
So in 10 years, you've never gotten sick?
Not really.
You've never got COVID?
I didn't get COVID, no.
And you've never been sick in 10 years?
Not really.
And you credit a lot of this.
Like every now and then, I'll
It
like
partly
have a
explains the
sniffly.
high output, but I'm just saying you credit some of this to this. So people that don't know, this is like it's a powder green thing.
Yeah.
I take them on the road. I don't use them at home because it's kind of expensive. So I travel with these things.
Yeah.
You take a packet, you mix it with water.
Yeah.
You chug this.
Yeah, I chug it.
That's a 445.
Some people say they think it tastes good. I think it's like I chug it.
It's a grassy bubble gum.
I take it with and now I take it with a packet of Element.
Yes,
the
LMNT
electrolyte salt powder.
Yeah.
Partially because I had a blood test that showed that I had like lower sodium than I should have, and so I noticed that like I just wasn't, for how much I was sweating during the day, I wasn't taking in enough salt because I don't put salt on my food, and so I just wasn't getting enough salt in my diet.
So the first two things you eat, LMNT, Athletic Greens.
I combine them too. They taste quite good when you combine them.
Unflavored LMNT?
No, I actually do like they have a new grapefruit flavor that's out that's amazing.
Okay.
It's delicious with
Not
the
just
greens.
the drink I'm having right here.
Super good. Yeah.
Okay.
So
we're at
I drink
450.
that. Yeah, 455.
I'm loving this. I'm like.
That's by like 4:55.
Okay.
And so then basically at 5 a.m. I put in a.
No one else is awake yet either.
Yeah,
It's like a dark house here.
Yeah.
Okay.
At 5 a.m. I put in a mobile order at Dunkin' Donuts for my large black cold brew. Because they open at 5, which is the local Dunkin' Donuts. It's like a minute drive away. Get in the car, drive over there. They know me because I get the exact same thing every morning. So I think even if I didn't order it, they would probably put it out there. So I go and grab that, get back to my house by 5:05.
What's the reason you do that versus making coffee?
I love Dunkin' Donuts, man. I would love to own
East
a Dunkin'
Coast.
Donuts franchise someday. I just love their cold brew. It's like, it's not too
Large,
tasty.
too. That's like, what is that?
Yeah.
Like 500 mils or something?
Yeah, part of it is just like psychological for me. I don't drink the whole thing, I don't think, and I just like having the big cup. It gets really cold because there's tons of ice in it. I don't know why. I mean, honestly, like I probably realistically drink the amount of a small one before it gets watered down to the point where you don't want to drink it. But I like having the big cup next to me. It's psychological. So I go and get it.
And just to ladle in here, your opinion on caffeine is?
I mean, as you can tell by the large Dunkin' cold brew, I'm pro caffeine.
Pro caffeine.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
no long-term negative things.
I
You
don't
don't
think so.
think.
I mean, coffee is, a lot of research shows it's good for you.
Right.
I try not to.
For people like me who don't
overconsume-
drink coffee, maybe I should start.
Yeah, I think it's like good. I think it reduces Alzheimer's risk. I think there's like actually research to support this. I don't want to cite things because I'm not
Brad
too
Stolberg,
facile with it, but I'm pretty
Mutual
sure.
Connection has written a lot about this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brad's super smart too, and a great guy to learn from on these fronts. But yeah, no, I'm pro caffeine. I would say I abused caffeine when I was in college. particularly once my arm was hurt, because I would take it before playing to try to like numb pain. And so at that point, there were times when I was definitely consuming over 1,000 milligrams a day of caffeine, which is definitely unhealthy. But like, a couple cups of coffee a day, I think is perfectly fine. And
still no food yet.
No food yet.
We got 3 different liquids here.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what happens here?
And then I go sit down at my desk. So my, my first real focus block of work is from 5 to 7:30 in the morning, like 5:05 to 7:30 in the morning. And what I learned about myself is that that's when I'm most creative. It's like first thing in the morning, fresh mind. There's no emails coming in. There's no texts. There's very little distraction because the house is still quiet. And I sit down to do whatever my like priority focus creative work of the day is. So on Mondays, that's writing my 2 newsletters for the week.
Wow.
And then
both those on one day.
Yeah, I knock them both out in the morning too,
Holy
actually.
Crap. And those are, for those that do not get this newsletter, which they should, everybody listening should, Curiosity Chronicle. And what do you call the Friday one?
The Friday 5.
The Friday 5.
I really just haven't branded it much. But
but they're substantial. Like for you to write both of these in one morning.
And I always know what I'm going to write about before I sit down at my desk. Like I do 15 minutes of prep the night before to make sure I can kind of hit the ground running. Like I know, for the 5 one for Friday, like I know what the pieces are that I'm going to curate. So I know I can just kind of sit down and write about them.
Are you online or offline for this?
Online or offline?
Like are you on the internet?
Yeah, I use ConvertKit is my email sending, so I draft everything up there, cloud based. But yeah, I write both of those.
You don't find it distracting
morning.
to be online?
No, because I have to do little pieces of research and grab quotes and grab things for all the pieces.
So you're able
to
be, because I find when I've got the internet on, like I actually write with the internet off.
Yeah.
It's the only way
for my book, I have to do that.
Yeah, I can't write with the internet on.
Yeah. For my book, I actually bought this device. It's called a Free Write. Have you seen this thing?
No.
It's super cool. You would love one. We got to get you one. It's and again, not an ad. I do know the founder, but no affiliation. It's a typewriter basically, and I think it's like getfreewrite.com maybe. And it's a typewriter looking device that they call it distraction-free writing tool. So it's basically a Kindle for writing. Like there's no apps, there's nothing on it. It looks like a typewriter. It has typewriter feel keys, and then it uploads to Google Drive. So you're just typing. It's not a great editing apparatus.
Surf the internet.
No, you can't surf the internet. There's nothing. But it's beautiful, and it feels really satisfying.
Hilariously back to the way we all wrote.
Totally. Yeah. So they have one called the Hemingwrite. That's like a Hemingway branded one, which is what I have, which is awesome for writing stuff in this distraction-free way.
5 to 7:30, you block out the time.
Yeah.
And Mondays, you write your newsletters for the week. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, how's it go?
Book stuff, right now at least.
So you landed a big book deal last year.
Yeah, in September of last year. Yeah, so working on that slowly.
No title or anything yet for this?
No title yet, officially at least. Unofficially, I suppose I have one, but I won't say it.
Okay. Yeah. No. Good. Yeah. Save it. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But does each day of the week have a focus like the way Monday does?
No, and that's probably an issue actually. It's one of the things I'm wrestling with right now is like finding the right cadence and routine for the book writing, because I'm struggling with just how long dated the project is and just how little dopamine associated with it as a result. Because the newsletter or even like Twitter, anything I'm doing, it has immediate feedback, immediate dopamine. Like I know replies. If I write these, you get email, like you send replies to my email and I read them and I'm like, oh, this is really neat. Yeah. Someone's experiencing it, whatever they're sending back, etc. And the book doesn't have that. Maybe it'll come out January of 2025. Like it's so far off, really hard to motivate yourself on a daily basis to put in whatever energy and effort required. So I'm struggling with that, trying to work on it.
Okay, now we're at 7. Mm-hmm. We're only at 7. Yeah. Now most people haven't even woken up. Yeah. Now what? Keep going. To the extent you're comfortable sharing, this daily routine that you have is somehow resulting in these massively high quality and high quantity outputs. So it really is.
Yeah, I'm a big believer.
The amount of stuff you're doing is huge. That's why I'm like, what is he doing to prime this pump?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in Parkinson's law. You're familiar with it? Yeah. Like the idea that work expands to fill the time allotted for its completion.
Yes,
so
perfectly
time bounding my newsletter writing actually has made the newsletters higher quality and more rich, which has been fascinating to me. I used to sort of graze on them. Like I would write the Wednesday one like on Tuesday, and then I would write the Friday one on Thursday, and it was always like and it was taking me the whole day, and I was kind of like coming to it, leaving it, etc. And then I decided one week, because I had to travel, I was like, oh, let me see. Actually, it was going to India, and so I was like, oh, let me see if I can get both of these done during this block Monday morning, because I have to. And I wrote these two just awesome newsletters, like really crisp. I mean, you write a lot. You know when you wrote like something that's an A versus like, yeah, you put out a lot of like B+ things that you're kind of like, yeah, this is fine, it's good. Like I wrote it, but it's not my favorite thing that I've written. And I wrote two great pieces. So then I decided, I'm just going to keep trying to do that. And what I found is that those time bounds that you put on things really level up your focus and your energy towards it. So
now 7 a.m. to noon.
Yeah,
Take
so
me to morning.
7:30, I finish that block, and that's when I kind of turn on dad mode. So at this point, my son is up. My wife usually has brought him down at that point for like breakfast and sort of his first kind of playtime, etc. And so normally I come out then, and we all hang out. He's one right now.
So the writing is in a closed room. It sounds like.
I have an office on the first floor, and then I also have like a little writing studio on the third floor of our house. And so I normally am on the third floor for like morning writing because it's a little bit more of like an inspired space, and it's a little more separated from if he's like, now he's very vocal and stuff, so I can't hear him if I'm on the third floor.
What makes it inspired?
It's quiet.
What
I have a corner.
Inspiring?
I have a corner that sort of is just like very zen, like the sort of aesthetics of it. It's sort of minimalist design. It's on the third floor, so I'm kind of like looking out over some trees and stuff. Like it just is.
You don't have stuff all over the wall to motivate you? You don't have quotes, sayings, pictures?
No.
None of that stuff,
No, clean walls, yeah.
Clean walls, interesting.
Yeah. Like contrast wall, like a white wall in front of me and then dark walls on the sides.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah.
And it's a laptop.
With a studio display, like the big Apple display. Although I'm definitely gonna get the Vision Pro and be sitting there with a display anywhere. Yeah, for sure.
Really? You're all in on that?
I'm all in on that. No, I'm all into that.
Oh my gosh! I feel like
I'm all in on these dystopian technologies. I love it. I love it.
So now it's dad mode.
Yeah.
And your son's young enough that he's like home all day.
Yeah, he's home all day. My wife is not working temporarily and really focused on being a mom. And so the two of us, are like the primary caregivers. I mean, she's obviously number one and really, really into it and amazing mom. But we don't have a nanny.
Do you talk
or
about
anything.
the split? Yeah, us neither, but we talk about the split. Like we're 75-25.
In what?
Like when we got the marriage prep course.
Oh, interesting.
Our marriage prep lady, who was our officiant, wanted to practice with us. She said, write down on the cue card the percentage of the total childcare you think you will do, and then we collectively counted to 3 and flipped them over.
Okay. And did you guys have the same percentage?
I'm telling you.
Did you have the same percentage?
I wrote down 25. She wrote down 75.
Oh, so perfect.
It worked out very well.
That was perfect.
And that's
the issue is if you wrote down like 10 and she wrote down 50 or something. Then you got a conflict.
The conversation that we're supposed to have before we get married, right?
Yeah.
So do you guys talk about that?
No, we didn't. We, my wife and I have an amazing story and relationship. Like we started dating in high school. She was 14. I was 15 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And there's something special about when a relationship works out after having to go through all of those different seasons. There's a really formative bond that has, it just has had to form in order to
so you're
have something
32,
work.
You've been together 18 years, 17 years. Wow.
Yeah. And, through different seasons and different personalities and big changes and, moves and 7 years of long distance and like all through
she
that.
Go to Stanford.
No, she went to school in New York at Parsons School of Design. And that, I think, has led to an incredible, like, big picture value alignment around things that allows us to navigate any little things that come along the way. Like, we just have such incredible alignment around the big things that matter that the small things work themselves out in whatever way they do. And so we don't talk about a lot of the little bumps, issues, etc., because we know that like the big stuff we're sort of aligned on. We sort of know what our end, begin with the end in mind. Like we kind of know where we're headed, and we've been able to navigate as a result really well.
So back to the day.
Yeah.
Dad mode
on.
Keep going. I want to get to 8 p.m. when you're lights out.
Yeah. So 7:30, dad
major
mode,
core
hang
tenets
out.
or tent poles, things that sort of you hang
basically
on the
for an hour, hang out, have breakfast with my son, etc.
Oh, breakfast now. We finally got some food
I actually
in
don't eat during that window. I don't eat during that window.
We still haven't had food.
I just kind of hang out with him while
he eats. So you're on intermittent fasting here.
Sort of, not by
But we haven't got any food into
necessarily.
it yet.
Not yet. I mean, so normally I take him for a walk at like 8:30. He takes his first nap of the day, and that's when I can kind of give my wife a break and take him for a nap while he does that. I normally, because I'm running a lot now, I will have like 2 English muffins with some honey or something like that while I'm taking him for a walk. Like I'll bring them out on the walk with me because having something in my stomach when I go do a hard running workout is important to me. So I will do that. That is the first food that I have.
And when he's falling asleep on the walk, what are you doing?
Just thinking.
You're not listening to podcasts on 4X or something?
No. I used to. That's my old self. No, I listen to nothing.
Wow.
During that walk,
Total silence mode. I like this.
Yeah, and I do have my phone on me, but I just go, that's just my thinking time. I'm a big believer that you need time to actually think and ideate in order to create at a high level in any area. And most of us dedicate no time in our routines to thinking. We dedicate tons of time to consuming things, to like podcasts on 4x speed, reading, whatever, all these other things. And we dedicate tons of time to creating, but we dedicate no time to actually thinking about the ideas, the things that have come in, and allowing them to wrestle and mingle in your mind. So the walks are that for me. That's when the ideas mingle.
And what if you get an idea? How are you documenting it?
Phone. Take out my phone.
You just take it, put it on notes.
Yeah. Not like send an email to myself. I carry around a little pocket notebook.
Yeah,
as
I saw
well,
your little moleskin
pretty much
there.
everywhere that I go.
Tiny little black hardcover moleskin and a pen.
I carry that around with me pretty much everywhere I go because it can fit in your pocket. And so then I'll jot things down. Sometimes what I found was I was doing that on my walks. It's very hard to continue walking and write. It's almost impossible while you have a stroller. It's definitely impossible.
Yeah.
And so the voice note just works much better.
Oh, voice notes.
Yeah. I'll just send myself an email like with the audio to text.
Oh, smart. Okay.
Thing. It makes it easy.
Have we arrived at your first meal of the day now?
Well, that was the English muffins.
Okay, 2 English muffins with honey.
Yeah, the 2 English muffins with honey is like my pre-run sort of thing. And so this is like a 3-mile walk loop that I do. It takes about an hour with my son. I come back 9:30, and then I'll go do my workouts for the day. So I'm running a lot right now, like 6-ish days a week, probably 40 to 50 miles a week. And I have a neighbor who's a big fitness influencer who's become a super close friend of mine. And the two of us do all of our running training together. So we'll go do whatever our run thing is for the day. Typically takes about an hour, depending on the distance that we're doing and the workout. I come back from that and I do my lift. I have a gym built out in the garage of the house. So I'll come back and do that. So that's, from like 9:30 to probably 11:30.
Wow, 2 hours of physical.
On
That's
any
like
given
what,
day.
5 days a week, 7 days a week?
I mean, I do something 7 days a week because I'm lifting 5 days a week.
The
running
six-pack is starting to make sense now here.
Yeah, I just like it's a huge part of my life and it's something that I care about deeply.
Think of all the athletic stuff you've done too. It's like as soon as you lose it, it's gone. Like
I also just believe that like in order to show up for the people you care about, you need to take care of yourself in whatever way that is. For me, taking care of myself mentally and physically is really important for me to be able to show up as the type of person that I want to. It's also a part of my job, like looking a certain way, motivating people in these other areas of their life, like thinking about what a balanced, wealthy life looks like, is my message. That is what I'm about. And so doing those things is actually, it's, you see, like I share videos while I'm training and while I'm doing things and the stuff I'm working at, the stuff I'm eating, like I'm sharing that stuff because people are hopefully learning and getting inspired by it. And so I really view all of that stuff as like part of my job, quote unquote. Right. That has been an adjustment with my wife for sure, of like convincing her that I'm not just like slacking off doing whatever I want during that. Like, no, this is actually how I make money and how I do these different things that I'm doing. That has been like an interesting learning experience of sort of navigating that. I mean, the natural reaction, which I think is the correct one that she would have, was like, I'm just seeing you like go and work out, you go for these long runs and doing these things, and like it just seems like when are you working? When are you doing the other stuff? And I had to kind of like explain to her that it's sort of different, like the way that I'm pursuing things and how I'm making money and the ways that I'm, going about life and what I'm building.
Oh, that was a challenge here. I thought it was about being like taking pictures of your meals.
Oh,
and
no,
not that part.
No.
Okay.
No, she understands that.
Now we get to lunch. Are we at lunch yet? You have a workout?
Yeah.
Now what are you eating for lunch?
Now we're at lunch. So post workout, I'll have like a big meal. I've actually been recently ordering from different meal prep companies to just try out different things and see what works, because I don't particularly like having to like think about and spend time on cooking at lunch. I love cooking at dinner, but at lunch I'm like, I just want to eat something healthy that kind of fills my macro nutritional needs, and then I want to get back to
Sample
doing
lunch meeting is like a what?
Sample lunch
People
would be
like-
like, rice and like 10 or 12 ounces of meat and some veggies.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Now afternoon.
Afternoon, so about 12:30, I'll go back and sit down at my desk. And that is typically like an open, deep work period for, 2.5, 3 hours in the afternoon. And normally that's related to things associated with my business operation stuff, things associated with content creation.
Thank you very much for the extra water.
Thank you. For different social media channels, or
how do you not fall into a rabbit hole? Because you're so on social media.
Yeah.
You got millions of followers.
Yeah.
Like if I go on Twitter, I'm like, I lose track of time and suddenly I'm just like 10 links deep on stuff. You don't seem to get distracted the way I do. Like, how do you
time? I don't know if you've
social
ever
media
used
is oriented to make you distracted. Like, that's the whole point of it.
I mean, it's at a certain scale, it becomes sort of unusable for like normal use cases, and so it actually makes you less likely to go down the rabbit hole on it in a weird way, because like you can't really check your notifications, because if I check it at any time, I'm missing million. I mean, there's just too much, and messages and all of these things. So all the stuff that distracts you at like a few thousand followers is actually hard to be distracted by at a million, because there's just too much of it.
And you
just
consciously
can't.
don't follow people. I believe. Like I think you have 0 followers
on Instagram.
Yeah, so there's some thesis there that I like.
I just didn't want to get into the whole like rabbit hole of Instagram.
Okay.
Because I had done that back in I don't know, in the like early years of my working
you don't follow
career.
Anybody.
Yeah, I had like gotten a lot of negative energy from like following people that I was starting to feel envious of or jealous, and like the whole thing of social media. And so I stopped. I actually deleted my Instagram back then in like 2017 or something, just to get away from it. And I brought it back once it became sort of a business use case, something I wanted to build. But I decided I wasn't going to follow anyone when I did that. And so I just like, my explore page is informed by things that I, watch, which is basically running videos, lifting videos, food videos, and that's about it.
Right. Or timeless wisdom videos.
I don't really look at that much stuff there, because I'm mostly like reading for stuff like that. So it's like on Instagram, it's mostly.
But you're getting like all the stuff you're writing about, the list of 20 heuristics, the list of you're getting that from somewhere.
Yeah. So in the afternoon, I read. That like during that time.
How do you decide what to read?
Whatever grabs me.
Well, how do you do that? Are you going on Amazon? Are you?
No, I mean, I'm like, I just have a repository built out, and like in Notion, I like, there are a handful of newsletters that curate interesting things that I like, have a high hit rate on finding interesting.
Two or three that you recommend?
I really like Rad Reads. This guy K, I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
That's okay.
So I don't
Rad Reads. We're going to put in the show notes all the stuff. Yeah.
Way underrated, way smaller than it should be, frankly. Like, he might have 40,000 readers, but like I think it's terrific stuff, and he's really he's a super kind human being, but also just a great read. And he pretty consistently every week curates like 5 or 6 articles in addition to the one he writes, and normally like 3 of them I read and find interesting.
So you're reading articles here, not books.
Yeah, I've honestly, like, over the last year, I've been more called to kind of short form writing than I have to long.
So Rad Reads is one.
Rad Reads is definitely one.
Any other bloggers, influencers, list makers?
I'm trying to think what I read consistently.
You've mentioned Tim Urban already.
Yeah,
We've talked about Tim Ferriss.
I obviously love Tim Ferriss. I find his 5 Bullet Friday to be fantastic. Shane Parrish, I love his writing. Farnham Street, Brain Food is his Saturday. It's fantastic. And all of these guys, I mean, it's amazing to me. Ryan Holiday's work I love. Daily Stoic, I love Daily Dad. All of these guys, it's amazing to me how supportive and helpful they've been to me. And, I come from the world of finance, where I think things are pretty zero sum, where people are like, oh, if you're winning, then I'm losing, so I don't want you to win.
Yeah.
And I've been blown away by how willing these guys have been to support someone that's sort of up and coming in a similar general arena, right? Like, I could see a case where they would be like, oh, I don't want to help this person because they're kind of coming towards my reader base. But they've all been just completely support. I mean, like Tim, Ryan, James Clear, like, Shane Parrish, all these guys have helped me in one way or another, given me advice, suggestions, genuinely supporting me. And that blows me away. Like,
Any
I think it's
bits
amazing.
of wisdom that stand out from you've mentioned some great big names of people that are sort of massive influencers. Anything that jumps out that they've suggested or that you've done, or a piece of advice you've taken?
I think taking email really seriously from both James Clear and Tim Ferriss has been one of the biggest pieces of advice.
What's that
Just
mean,
like
taking it seriously?
how much they prioritize and care about their email lists. I never really focused on, for the first 2 years that I'd been writing on the internet, I didn't really think much about my email list and my newsletter. First year, I didn't have one. And then from May 2021 through May 2022, I sort of did it, but not really trying to grow it. I was just sort of putting out the pieces and it was fine.
Yeah.
And then I really started taking it seriously in really May 2022. So for about the last year.
Why should people listening take such... If you're trying to affect a large change, you think email list is the most important thing?
It's just owned audience. It's audience that you can't, have a platform take away from you.
Yeah, nothing in between you.
And it's, it's someone who is like my newsletter subscribers today, it reaches 410, 15,000 people. By the time this comes out, hopefully, maybe a multiple
It's growing
of that.
very fast.
Growing very fast. And it's people that are deciding to give you their attention twice a week for a few minutes.
In the sacred
5
space,
minutes of
their
time,
inbox.
in a sacred space in their inbox that is increasingly cluttered.
Yes.
And they're taking the time to do this.
Which they're pruning probably more often now, right?
And that is a very, very deep connection and relationship that is super valuable. And so when it comes to launching a book or when it comes to launching really anything, I think there's a ton of value in that. And so I've certainly learned that.
For people that are listening to this, that is growing too. You hear a lot more, the email list becoming a big source of everything else for people. That's a great piece of advice.
Yeah.
So now, are we at dinner yet?
Trying to think. Yeah, that afternoon work block is sort of done.
Pretty regimented though. I mean, you got time. You said 12:30. For 2.5 hours.
Yeah, I have it blocked on my calendar.
Really?
Those are I try to keep my calendar pretty free.
And I'm not seeing any meeting times here, and I'm not seeing any meetings.
Only Thursdays.
Only Thursdays?
Thursday's the only day that I will do phone calls.
So one
meetings.
day for that.
Yeah. I block it again to the point of Parkinson's law. Just bash it all into a single day.
And the other thing that I'm not hearing or seeing is any sort of news consumption.
I don't do any news. Almost none. I mean, honestly,
You're not checking any news sites.
No, I can go through a whole week and have no idea, not read anything. I used to read Axios, their morning, Mike Allen's Daily 5, which I think is fantastic. I don't even do that anymore. Honestly, I'm fairly low informed about current events.
And that's a
modern
thoughtful
news.
decision.
Yeah, I just there are very few things that I think you consume in the news that matter, in 2 weeks. And so it's sort of, to me, just time that I would spend on that versus that I could consume something timeless and evergreen. And if my time is finite and if my day is finite, my attention is definitely finite, my energy is definitely finite, I don't want to waste it on things that aren't going to matter in 2 weeks.
And then are we taking into family time now after this?
Yeah, so afternoon, late afternoon, early evening, I take my son for another walk. He has a last nap of the day, sort of around 3:34.
30,000 steps a day here or something.
Yeah, between my run and between my 6 miles of walking with him on a daily basis, probably about 30,000 steps. A lot. Yeah, so
it's starting to make sense what you do. So I'm starting to see it now up close.
Yeah,
because you've gone to a nice granular level of detail here, and we've hung out a while here on this question, but it's really intriguing.
Yeah.
Your daily regimen is very fascinating.
I mean, it's interesting because on the surface level, you would look at my day and say, you don't work that much. That would be, what I think a normal, my former colleague would look at that and say, oh, you literally work for 4 hours or 5 hours a day. And it's interesting to me because personally, I mean, first off, I think of a lot of the things I'm doing during the day as being on and working.
It's called the 4-hour work week.
But
here.
and I think I've learned, and so we'll come back to how the book impacted me later. But my time on walks when I'm thinking and ideating on things, I consider work. It's a core part of my ability to produce thoughtful, interesting content every week is spending time every single day thinking and ideating on things. Later in the day, I mean, we haven't quite gotten to it yet, but later in the day, I take him for a walk. We go to the grocery store, get food, cook dinner all together around 5 o'clock, so super early, and then hang out
Still
after dinner.
heavy meat and vegetable dinner?
Yeah, meat, vegetable, and carbs, depending on what workout that I did during the day.
Depending on the workout. Interesting.
Yeah, if I did like a hard lift plus a run, I'll have like a heavier carb dinner for sure. I'm eating a lot right now. Like, you're catching me in a time when I'm eating a ton because I'm simply running. Like, I'm burning too many calories a day. I cannot, like, if I don't eat copious amounts of food right now, I will just wither away.
But the cooking part is a really formative part of the day here.
Yeah, I really enjoy that.
And that's you, your wife, and your child?
Like listening to music, and, you know, my wife is like kind of playing with my son, and I'll cook us all dinner while we're all kind of hanging out in the kitchen. That's always like a fun thing. Nice. And nice family time, like totally unplugged. My phone's in a different room.
Is your phone off for the day here now?
No,
okay,
not
you
quite.
Go back
I need
online.
I need it to be, actually, and it should be, but it's not. I normally check my phone after dinner before sort of shutting down for the day.
Then you shut down. After dinner.
Yeah, so dinner ends, say around 6. My wife will get my son ready for bed. I go do my sauna in the evening. So I've got a sauna on the deck next to the cold plunge. I do 20-ish minutes.
Like a sauna, like it has like rocks in it, that kind of thing?
Yeah, like a full sauna. I mean, set it at 210 degrees, go in there for 20 minutes, and I bring whatever I've been really excited to read from the day. I print out, actually, and I shouldn't print it out, but you can't bring technology in there, so I literally print it on paper, which people will get mad at me about.
Why?
But wasting paper.
Oh, come on.
Yeah. I've had people yell at me about this on the internet.
A piece of paper.
I mean, it's like multiple, whatever. You're printing out pages.
You're about to write a book here. That's going to be a lot.
Anyway.
So you bring in stuff that you print out as articles and you read them.
Yeah, because you can't bring technology. It's too hot. Yeah. Everything will shut off. Kindle shuts off everything. Paper. Yeah, exactly.
Fahrenheit 451.
Yeah, exactly.
You're safe.
So I bring whatever I'm excited to read about in there. And it's an amazing. I mean, it's honestly one of my favorite, like, kind of new rituals. Like, I've only had the sauna for the last 4 or 5 months.
Any specific brand or thing you recommend here on the sauna? 'Cause you recommended an ice bath company.
Yeah, I have the sauna from the same company that made the cold plunge. Actually, they launched a sauna. It's big. It's like, you can fit like 6 people in there, which I probably don't need because it's just me basically 99% of the time. There's a company called Sisu, SISU, that makes a beautiful 2-person barrel sauna, like a beautiful barrel that my neighbor, my close friend, has. That's gorgeous. And so if you were looking for a smaller sauna that's like a lower price point.
On this whole thing? Why are you doing the sauna every day?
The sauna is incredible for longevity and your health. I mean, there's unbelievable amount of research now that just shows that, like, regular sauna usage increases your lifespan and longevity.
Like regular, like every day.
Yeah, I mean, it's like cardiovascular strength. It's incredible for you.
No downsides.
Not as far as I know. I'm sure if you did, much hotter than that for too long of a period, there might be.
20 minutes in there, full sweat.
Yeah, I mean, it's intense at that heat. The last 5 minutes of it, you're like really pouring sweat. They say 180 to 210 is sort of the Fahrenheit is sort of the sweet spot. I run it at 210 typically just because I like it hot and to feel like I really sweated, but anywhere in that range.
Okay. Then what after that?
And then I get out, rinse off, and get into bed.
Oh, you go right from that to bed.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Take kind of like a coldish shower just to like rinse off and cool down a little bit, and then get into bed. And normally,
you said you read sometimes in bed.
Yeah, I normally watch a show with my wife first. Okay. That's sort of like, it's a weird thing, but it's sort of like part of our bonding during the days. Like, it's a quiet time for the two of us. We'll have a show that we've been excited about and watching, and rather than sitting in the living room and watching it, we like to just watch it in bed.
Laptop?
No, we've got TV.
Okay.
Which everyone says you shouldn't have a TV in your
screens
bedroom.
in the bedroom,
but I love it.
Yeah.
And it's never really impacted my sleep, so it's fine.
Yeah.
So we watch a show, whatever it is we're watching, and then she passes out. She might fall asleep at like 7:30. She falls asleep really
early to bed, folks. Though.
Yeah. I mean, we're on like full grandma schedule for sure. And love it. Like, I don't.
You're doing a lot with that, though. Yeah. I mean, people. I think a lot of people listening are going to be very jealous of your life and your lifestyle and what you're doing. But when you hear the inputs here, like, this is not an achievable type of input for most people.
I mean, most people couldn't do
a lot of couldn't do's here.
And like, the like discipline that I've had around it for many, many years. And just like the amount of activity I have during day. Like I think it would be hard to sustain for a lot of people, but building into it with some of the core principles and core elements of it, I think most people could do.
Oh my gosh, this is fascinating. You went really deep on daily routine. I really appreciate it. I haven't heard you speak at that level before.
Yeah.
And I think that's just fascinating. I have so many more questions on the 4-hour working, and I also don't want to bog us down on this one book. I have questions on mentors, questions on social media, questions on investing. Let's keep those in the back of our mind as we keep moving forward, because at some point, I don't know how old you were, but you read The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. This was after college?
Yeah, this was after
college. Was
college.
it next, or was the other book?
No, it's this
Monk
one.
Who Sold His Ferrari. Originally, so this book is originally published in 1996 by HarperCollins. Large gold. I got the book right here. The Monk Who Sold Ferrari in like a kind of a purple serify font, a spiritual fable about fulfilling your dreams and reaching your destiny. And it's kind of on like a sort of a Lion King without the animals type of background, with like greenish forest, like it looks like there's some water, like a calm, cool place. Robin S. Sharma across the top, national bestseller. This inspiring tale provides step-by-step approach to living with greater courage, balance, abundance, and joy. It tells the story. So this is a parable, interesting, of Julian Mantle, a lawyer forced to confront the spiritual crisis of his out-of-balance life. On a life-changing odyssey to an ancient culture, he discovers powerful, wise, and practical lessons that teach us to, here we go, develop joyful thoughts, follow our life's mission and calling, cultivate self-discipline and act courageously, value time as our most important commodity, nourish our relationships, and live fully one day at a time. Robin Sharma, of Indian heritage, born 1964, Nova Scotia, Canada. Filed this one Dewey Decimal Hands under 158.1 for personal improvement. Sahil, tell us about your relationship with the monk who sold his Ferrari.
Yeah. So I read this book for the first time in 2021. So relatively recently. It's a massive bestseller. It's definitely sold over 1 million copies. Very, very well-known, famous book. It came to me at the right time in my life when I was starting to, for the first time, think about my own priorities of what mattered and what I thought wealth and success looked like, and started to reevaluate those things. I had, as I mentioned earlier, sort of like marched down the path of default success, and that was making money and getting promoted and the status and all of those things. And COVID, for me, like for a lot of people, caused me to pause. It was like a forced slowdown event that caused me to just think about more broadly what mattered to me in the world and what mattered to me in life. And so as I was searching, really just on the internet, like bouncing around, saying like, what are the right ways to think about values and things you care about, this book kept popping up. People talking about it, different blogs, different things, recommendations, etc. And I was like, okay, I got to get this book. It's short, it's easy to read.
Over again,
So I ordered it. And then I ordered the audiobook as well, actually. And I probably in a span of like a day read the book and then listened to the audiobook version of it, because I had heard the audiobook had a really nice telling. And it immediately impacted me. It's a story of someone who was like on a very similar journey to me. This like high-powered attorney pursuing wealth at all costs, the Ferrari, the like everything that came with that.
You didn't
the
have
status.
a Ferrari, though.
I didn't have a Ferrari.
Yeah. Were you driving a fancy car?
Yeah, I had a nice car.
You're not going to tell us which one.
No. But
it was. You could relate to this character.
Yeah, and I still have a nice car. I still like my car. I was basically pursuing that life and like pushing kind of wealth at all costs. And at the time when it came into my life, I realized that there had to be something more, and that I was sort of living someone else's trajectory and someone else's life, and that I was going to end up rich and miserable, which was my definition of the biggest failure that I could experience. If you get one shot at it, I just didn't want that. And I saw so many people that I knew that were around my world that were extremely wealthy, extremely successful, quote unquote, but were on their second or third marriage. Kids didn't talk to them, weren't able to, be around, didn't have their health because they had, allowed that to atrophy. All these things that I thought of as components of a wealthy life that they had lost and sacrificed on their journey to the one true God of money. And this book sort of pushes against that exact idea, and in sort of like an interesting, quirky narrative format, breaks down your definition of success and what you thought wealth and success looked like. And so it really resonated with me at the time in my life when it came in. I think that's the common theme among all these books that we'll talk about is it's the right book at the right time that impacts you. It's not necessarily just the content. It's when it hits you and how it resonates with you and connects with you.
And you were also searching. I was searching. You were Googling. You were typing in like how to find your values or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's, I was on a quest to try to answer these questions and starting to struggle with them for the first time. And finding this book and experiencing it and then wrestling with it in my own life after I had read it was really an impactful journey for me.
Did this change your trajectory? 220?
Yeah, I mean, it came right around the same time as that conversation with a friend that I mentioned earlier.
You were still on the West Coast when you read this.
Still on the West Coast when I read it. Mm-hmm. And, the confluence of factors like this book, my own wrestling with these ideas, and then my friend being the sort of the tipping point of that conversation led to the decision to make all these changes in our life and to start pursuing something different.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that it's only been 2 years since you read this like two years ago, 2 years, and you've gone so big, so fast. The book deal has landed, right?
Yeah.
And the book's coming out, you say 2025.
Yeah.
But this book really kind of sounds like it really helped level set and steer you a little bit. A lot of stuff pops out to me from this book. One famous quote from the book, one of the most famous quotes of the book is, "Success on the outside means nothing unless you also have success within." You talked a lot about your daily routine and habits, and you've mentioned your values a little bit, but is there some sort of internal, now that it's not just having the Ferrari, as the book's title says, do you have any internal metrics that you use to define success for yourself?
Yeah.
Or any internal scorecard that you like to reference or even just mentally think about?
I mean, my own daily energy and joy is a huge driver for me. I, spent the first 7 years of my career driving, pushing myself, and I wasn't really sure why. I had like the Sunday night, you're dreading the week, or, it's like the end of the week and you're so relieved that it's the weekend or you made it and you survived. And I don't have that anymore. I like genuinely, I said to my wife, actually, we're sitting here, it's a Monday, on Sunday evening, I said to my wife, I was like, wow, I actually really enjoy Sunday evenings for the first time in my life because I'm excited to wake up on Monday and write my newsletters. Like, I have energy around that. I'm really excited to hit the ground running and to do these things that I get to do. I'm excited to go meet this guy that I've been chatting with for a while. Like, there are things on a daily basis that I have so much joy and energy around now that I never had as part
very
of my
simple scorecard, energy.
Life. Yeah, I mean, how am I feeling on a daily basis? Like, do I have just positive energy around things? It doesn't mean that you have to be happy and like smiling and jumping around all day, but are you feeling drained, or are you feeling like energy is being created for you on a daily basis?
And what's giving you the most energy these days? What's
being a dad for sure is the most energy. I mean, getting to see the change in my son on a daily basis and spend time with him and my wife and see how my wife has grown as a human being and being a mother, and seeing my son's relationship with his grandparents and getting to be around for all of that. Like, those things, I can't imagine something more energy creating than that. And as tiring as I think being a parent can be, especially to a young kid, I kind of separate like things being tiring from being energy creating. Like, I get a ton of energy from seeing him, interact with my parents, as an example. But driving there and, getting together and having to get him back in the car seat and doing all those things, they're tiring, but a ton of energy, and like my internal, meter is
it's like
created
shin splints on the marathon.
Yeah.
It's part of the pain that leads to the progress. You also mentioned wealth. You mentioned that word wealth. This book and a lot of your work focus on this concept of true wealth.
That's what my book is about.
Yeah. So how do you define this? Am I saying the phrase right? True wealth? Is that what you call it?
I mean, my book is tentatively going to be titled The 5 Types of Wealth, and it's going to be all about this general journey, my personal journey towards redefining what I viewed as wealth, and towards building a new scoreboard. Like, I think the traditional scoreboard is to think of money as the only type of wealth, and to measure your success or failure in life based on whether that number is going up or down, and whether it meets society's definition of rich, by a traditional measure. And my view is that there's a much more comprehensive way to think about what a wealthy life looks like, and that by driving towards it, you can find a much more fulfilling existence, and one that will be balanced across the different seasons that you experience as an individual.
What are the 5 types of wealth?
Do you want me to reveal it now, or can I wait until the book?
I feel like I've read this Twitter.
Yeah, I wrote a before writing the book proposal, I tested the idea effectively on Twitter.
Yeah.
I have this amazing sort of platform where I can test ideas and see what resonates and whether people connect with them or whether I need to refine them.
I feel like I have the 5 types of wealth written in here.
So the 5 types are financial wealth, obviously, being one of them, and then time wealth, social wealth, physical wealth, and mental wealth.
Time wealth.
So time wealth, the freedom to choose, etc., which people have talked about. Social wealth being your relationships, family, culture. Physical wealth, your own health, vitality, etc., and then mental wealth, which I bucket as like your knowledge, wisdom, kind of the compounding effect of all of that, plus your own ability to wrestle and grapple with these kind of unanswerable questions of life, which is like spirituality, mindfulness, religion, etc.
Wow, that's massive what you just said. Like that, to wrestle with these unanswerable questions.
I like defining it as that versus like religion or God or spirituality, because I think unanswerable questions covers people that actually don't believe necessarily in some like higher power, but do wrestle with those questions and contend with what they believe their meaning
yourself
is
in.
I wouldn't say I'm religious
Jewish,
in a
mom
tradition.
was
I grew up. Yeah. My mom grew up Hindu, but we had Muslim influence in our family. We had Buddhist influence.
Well, even
in our
just starting with
family.
Hindu-Jewish wedding,
exactly.
I start there.
Yeah. So a little bit all over the map. I would say I have a level of faith, but I'm not religious. I certainly don't kind of characterize myself as like a religious person, but I think I have a level of faith.
Yeah, and that's what you're exploring in this book. The 5 types of wealth, getting us off of the bent of, and it's so related to the title of the book, "The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari," kind of communicates that, but you're taking it 12 steps further. Razors is another thing that comes up with you, on defining wealth. You have one called the Smart Friends razor. I don't know if you made this up or if you got it from somewhere.
I made it up.
You made it up? If your smartest friends are all interested in something, it's worth paying attention to. If that something seems crazy, it's worth paying a lot of attention to. The passions of the smartest people in your circles are a looking glass into the future. This is what you wrote.
Yeah.
So what are your smart friends paying attention to today?
I mean, I'd say right now it's definitely been a lot around AI and what the future of AI looks like. And that probably held true 6 to 9 months ago, like just before ChatGPT came out. So it would have been a good looking glass into the future with how prevalent it's all become. But, if I go back 10 years, I had a lot of smart friends who were deeply, deeply fascinated by esports and like telling me how people were going to go watch people play video games in Madison Square Garden someday. And I was like, you're ridiculous. That is so stupid. No one's going to go watch video games. And lo and behold, if I had invested in that trend, I would have done really, really well on it. And so the rule came from actually missing on several of these things over and over again, and realizing that when a lot of your smartest people in your circle are talking about a single thing, it's probably not crazy. There's probably something to it that you just don't understand.
And today is AI.
I think AI is probably the biggest one that people are still talking about.
Did you get a gleaning sense of what that is going to do to your or my or our shared industry of this world of
content
self-improvement?
Yeah, I mean, look, I kind of said it earlier. I think that in a world where baseline content becomes increasingly commoditized, human connection and real human connection becomes the real differentiator.
Yeah.
And so it's a big, I mean, again, it's a big driver of why I believe in, for myself, putting myself out there and being the human connection that, I can really create. It's also a big reason why, like I don't make money necessarily off my content. Like my business is not the content that I put out. I give everything away for free. I don't charge for anything. I don't do courses. I don't have products
executive
that I sell.
Coaching clients.
I don't do any of that. I don't do any of those things.
Training courses.
No.
You're not getting people to.
No. So that's
you're not selling pens like James is.
I don't have pens. I don't. And my book will be the first thing that I ask people to buy. My newsletter technically has sponsors on every issue, but I reinvest every dollar of that into growing the newsletter. So I'm really not making money off my content. All of my money that I make is off businesses.
Wait, so okay. Thank you for opening this up. This is really helpful and valuable. You were on the My First Million podcast, and you said something like, I have the exact quote. You said, every subscriber I get is worth $3 to $4 to me on my newsletter. That was with the funding of the advertisements in your newsletter. Mm-hmm. And you say, I reinvest all that in the newsletter. What does that mean? So you
go acquire new subscribers.
How do you do what?
Through paid ads or through recommendation engines or through, any of those means.
Paid ads on what?
Well, you can run ads on Instagram or on Facebook or on
paid
TikTok.
Ads, boosting posts and all that. Okay.
Yeah, just like, you know, the same way like Morning Brew runs ads to get new subscribers for Morning Brew. I can do that for my newsletter.
So you're taking the money from the sponsors that are on the thing, but the sponsors only kick in. So people listen to this. I'm trying to just apply this to the average person here. People listen to this, you don't qualify for ads in your newsletter until you have some sort of base of level. Like
I mean, now if you have a niche newsletter that's like 10,000 subscribers, you can get sponsors on that for sure. Especially on ConvertKit has a sponsor network where they'll actually place the ads for you, so you don't have to do anything.
I know, because half the newsletters I get now say like your ad here.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of printed right in the front.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. Okay, this is fascinating.
And for a lot of people, I mean, for the vast majority of people, that's their business model with the newsletters. Like they're making money. That's how they live.
Keep the
that's
money.
What they're paying on a daily basis.
That's your business.
Exactly.
You're giving content.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But you're funding all this because presumably that's because when the book comes out, then you tell more and more people about it through an email list.
Yeah, I want the book to reach millions of people. And so, if my newsletter list reaches over 1 million by the time the book comes out, that really helps with the initial launch and having a lot of people buy it.
This is the James Clear model that not only were you both college baseball players, like you guys, you couldn't think of a more similar person, right? Like it's like, then you grow this massive email list through the concept of distilling wisdom.
Yeah.
You know, so what would you do if you were him right now? I'm curious, because he's got one book out. It sold 15 million copies, Atomic Habits.
10 million, right?
It says 15 on the website now.
15?
Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. You missed the last 5 million.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's unbelievable.
And he's got the biggest newsletter around. I think 2 million, 2.5 million subscribers.
Yeah.
His next product was, I believe, like a luxury pen.
Yeah.
Right? With like
he doesn't
stuff on
really
the side.
need to do anything if he doesn't want to. And he's in a great position. You know, I don't think he's like a particularly fancy person. And he probably, I mean, if the book is still selling 1 million plus copies a year, he's making several $1 million in royalties per year just off the book. He has a thriving speaking business where I'm sure he gets paid 6 figures to go give talks at places about building great habits, breaking bad ones.
Human connections, the scarce resource.
And his newsletter, I would guess, is like $25,000 to $30,000 per send to sponsor, and he sends it once a week. So there's another, $100,000 a month.
You're
or
done.
so.
Tap out. Retire.
No, but I just I don't think if he doesn't want to write another book, like Ryan Holiday has made a career out of writing a new book pretty much every year. Like, right, he puts out a great book every year, and that's what he really enjoys doing. He gets a lot of energy from it. It doesn't seem like that's what James necessarily wants to do because he hasn't done another book. I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with your first book being as successful as James's has been. I don't necessarily think he would say that, but it's a big thing to try to live up to with the second book that you put out.
Sequelitis.
So,
There's even an industry term for it in the publishing world. They call it sequelitis.
So I think he can figure out where his energy lies around what he wants to do next. And I mean, his book has an unbelievable legacy that is continuing to flourish and thrive and will continue to, because you kind of hit escape velocity with books, as you know, and that clearly has. So I don't think he has to do anything, which is a great position to be in.
But I was curious what you would do.
What I would do.
Would you go for book number 2?
No, I mean, look, I would do what I'm doing now, which is like I have all these businesses in my holding company that I really enjoy getting to spend time and kind of think about the strategy around and partner with great people to build. And so I'd probably just keep doing that.
I love it. There's a quote in this book, your can is more important than your IQ. That's the quote. Your can is more important than your IQ. So Robin Sharma is of Indian descent, right? He's from Nova Scotia, but he's of Indian descent. You said on the Growth Equation podcast, the fact that I'm not a doctor, Rhodes Scholar, McKinsey, or Goldman Sachs is a big knock on my resume with my mom. I know you were joking, but I'm thinking about those Indian values. That's what I'm familiar with. And which of those kind of high achievement values do you like that you are trying to impart onto your now growing family? Like how do you distill that? You're second generation here.
Yeah. I think viewing excellent as the standard is something that I hold in very high regard.
Viewing excellent as the standard.
Yeah. I never got patted on the back for just doing a good job on something. And I am very grateful for that. Like, I came to view doing an excellent job on something as the standard that my family believed in, and that I had to learn that the hard way at times, and I had to learn that, like, you know, I had to figure out my own way and push really hard and work hard. But I grew up watching my dad, as I said earlier, really work deeply on things that lit him up intellectually, that he loved intellectually, and that he still loves to this day. You know, he's almost 70 years old, and that he still just gets, you can see his whole face light up when he has some problem that he's excited, that he's thinking about and talking about with you. And I mean, I remember flying with him on a trip to Asia when he was giving a talk there, and I got to go along with him, just the two of us. And, you know, I was like getting to be his plus one. So I'm sitting in business class with my dad, and you're a kid in like a lie flat bed with the movies and the food. It was like the best time of my life. I would have stayed on the plane the entire time. And I was watching all the stuff, eating all the food, and he was sitting there working on a talk, not watching the TV, the entire flight, 12 hours or whatever to Asia. And I remember watching it and being like, Dad, you didn't eat, like, you didn't watch a movie. And he was like, no, I had to get this done. I have a big talk. Like, he was giving the keynote speech at whatever this thing was. And seeing that, like, he couldn't have taught me that, but observing him embody those values and those principles, I can't imagine something more impactful than that. Yeah. Of just thinking about excellence as the standard of how you operate.
And figuring out how to impart that value and wisdom without it creating, anxiety and pressure. And like, there's a lot of people that kind of snap with that type of high expectations that can sometimes be.
It's interesting because I never felt necessarily like it was an expectation that was pushed on me. I joke about it as like, oh, McKinsey, you're a Rhodes Scholar. And I think my parents, I'm sure, I don't think they viewed it as an expectation as much as they knew what I was capable of. And so it disappointed my mom when she felt like I was selling myself short, that like I was self-sabotaging in my behavior and the ways I was acting. But I had to find my own journey to realizing that about myself, that I was capable of those things and to really embracing them in my own way. So that was always interesting.
Your can is more important than your IQ.
Yeah.
The hard work of a 12-hour flight is kind of stuck with you as an impactful kind of
and
memory.
I just found it in a different order. I mean, I found it with baseball. Like, I found that I would really push myself and was extremely dedicated to something at a young age and put all my energy into it. It took until my senior year of college to find that academically.
Because you weren't, it wasn't, because then once the arm stopped working.
Yeah, and I didn't care about it. And I didn't have a competitive instinct around academics. And then I lived with a guy, close friend of mine, a guy named Kendall Fisher, who was extremely driven academically. And I started to feel competitive with him because we were in similar classes. And he was like getting an A+ in something and I wasn't. And he was like, hey man, like, why didn't you work as hard on that thing? And I did better than you, or whatever it was. And he was a close friend of mine. And it was the first time I had ever been pushed academically in the way that I felt like I'd been pushed athletically.
Oh, interesting.
And it was extremely, extremely foundational to shifting my own identity in my mind of who I was and what I was capable of.
And it didn't come from a book. It came from living with this guy.
I mean, I've always been a big believer that your environment shapes your reality. The people you surround yourself with have the potential to massively level you up as an individual or to massively hold you back. And getting around him academically was one of the most impactful things in my entire life. I tell him that all the time. We actually don't talk all that often anymore. He lives in Seattle. He's a lawyer and still someone I consider a friend to this day, but we don't talk all the time. And when we do talk, I always tell him how appreciative I am of the fact that he pushed me, because I wouldn't have ever found my way academically if not for him.
That's so interesting. I love how you tied it back to sports too. Well, one of the people you've surrounded yourself by, as well as Robin Sharma and Tim Ferriss, is Oliver Burkeman. And so I know this has got to be your most recent book, because the book 4,000 Weeks was originally published in August 2021 by Farrar, Straus and Giroux, I think as you pronounce it. It's like a yellowish, creamish cover. It says 4,000 Weeks, all in writing, not in numbers, and like a cap sort of serif font. Time Management for Mortals is the subheadline that's highlighted by Oliver Burkeman. There's a picture of an Atlas statue in the bottom right holding up a yellow circular analog wall clock instead of the globe. Oliver Burkeman, born 1975, 48 years old, living over in the United Kingdom. He is a British author and journalist, formerly writing the weekly column, This Column Will Change Your Life, for The Guardian. In 2021, he published this book, 4,000 Weeks, which became a massive, huge hit. Don't know how many copies it sold, but it is certainly very well regarded. What's it about? Well, assuming you live to be 80, you have just over 4,000 weeks of life. Drawing on the insights of ancient and contemporary philosophers, psychologists, and spiritual teachers, Oliver Burkeman delivers an entertaining, humorous, practical, and ultimately profound guide to time and time management. Rejecting the futile modern fixation on getting everything done, 4,000 Weeks introduces readers to tools for constructing a meaningful life by embracing finitude. Did I say that right? Showing how many of the unhelpful ways we've come to think about time aren't inescapable, unchanging truths, but of choices we've made as individuals and society. File this one, same places for our work week, 650.1 for personal success in business. Your third and final book on today's show. Tell us about your relationship with 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman.
Yeah, I honestly don't recall how I came across this book, but I bought it and sat down, and again, like the monk who sold his Ferrari, I think I read it over the course of 2 days.
Wow, that's a thick book.
Yeah, cranked through this book.
In the sauna.
It was summer of 2022, I want to say.
Okay.
Just
Recently.
after my son was born.
Okay.
And I was in this very interesting and weird changed mental space of, for the first time in my life, wrestling with time and its meaning in my life and how it had changed with the birth of my son and my own mortality and how that was sort of my son's youth juxtaposed with the maturity of my parents, and I was in this like really weird, thoughtful place in my life, and this book came in and spoke to all of those weird, changing sensations that I was experiencing.
Time and place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the story with it's the common thread among all of these books that we've talked about is like the right book at the right time becomes deeply, deeply impactful, and this is a really special book. I mean, if you haven't read it, it's a very unique book. I don't think it's going to sell, 10 million copies like Atomic Habits. I don't know that it'll sell 1 million copies. But it is a very special book, extremely well written. Oliver is one of, my favorite modern day philosophers, if you will, up there with Orion Holiday as like a daily, a kind of modern stoic, etc. But he's just a very empathetic and beautiful writer. And
it reads like literature.
Yeah, it reads like a beautiful novel, and you kind of experience it differently based on where you are in life and your own, problems that you're wrestling with and on your journey. It has this one section that really deeply impacted me that I remember I connected with vividly. That was around this tendency to bemoan negative or stressful situations on a daily basis. And, you're stuck in traffic. And you're like, oh, man, you're like cursing, stuck in traffic. This is awful. And then he sort of rationalizes that feeling with how much someone who couldn't be there would love to be if in your situation, that moment. So he talks about this guy whose closest friend had just passed away. And he's sitting in traffic after that, and he's cursing and wanting to curse this traffic, and then realizes how much his friend would do anything to be able to sit in that traffic jam
to
be alive. And I remember like being deeply moved by it, like extremely emotional and feeling that. And that weekend, we drove with my son, who was 2 months old at the time, to Philadelphia, and we were coming back and got stuck in this terrible traffic jam after like a Giants football game or something, and my son was crying because he like had woken up, and we're stuck in traffic. It's going to take another 2 hours to get home when it should have taken 30 minutes. Just got to go over the GW bridge, and I'm like cursing sitting there. And then I said to my wife, who was getting stressed as well, I was like, I just read this thing about this exact situation, and how we just need to just embrace this, because how much someday we would wish to be able to do this and to be able to experience this moment that we're in today. And I really can't think of a single concept that has impacted me as deeply as that one, of just like any stressful moment in life that we're experiencing, when you're 80 or when you're gone, like you would give anything to be back in that moment and to be able to embrace and enjoy that. And especially with my child's young years and these first 10 years of his life, when I'm older, I mean, my parents, I'm sure, would do anything to be able to go back to when we were little kids and to be able to enjoy
and
that
the
again.
health that comes with
and
that.
And to have their health back. So this book really, really deeply moved me and really deeply impacted my own thinking on time, which has been one of the areas of my writing that I think has connected with and resonated with people, on a broader and deeper level than anything else I've written about.
Where's your, on what specifically?
I mean, I've written now a lot over the last year about my own sort of like
The Time Billionaire.
Yeah, the Time Billionaire concept from Graham Duncan, and my own just like journey with experiencing and thinking about time and how it's changed with, when you have a kid, for the first time in your life, you start measuring time in weeks and months. You never do that. Like, when is the last time you ever said, like, 2 weeks have gone by, 3 weeks have gone by? But with a kid, when someone asks you how old they are, you say, like, they're 7 weeks, or they're 9 weeks, or they're 3 weeks, or whatever it is. And so for the first time in your life, you're forced to adjust to the passage of time on a weekly and monthly scale. And that is just a massive change in how you live on a day-to-day basis.
And then if you don't see your kid for a day, you come back, they look different.
Yeah, they look different. I traveled for the first time when he was maybe 4 or 5 months old, and I remember I came back and it took him a second to figure out who I was. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be gone ever. I never want to leave again, which obviously you can't always do, but it's it really, really is deeply impactful to think about. So, I mean, I just thought this book I thought it was beautifully written, and just had several things in it that were deeply, deeply moving. It also, the subtitle of the book I laugh about, because it's not a time management book. It's it's a, part of me thinks that the publisher made them do that so that it would stand out on the shelf and be like a productivity book that people could pick up if they were productivity gurus, when it's really like a philosophy and thinking book. I actually asked Oliver about that. He didn't give me a direct answer on it, but part of me thinks that the publisher pushed for the subtitle so that it would fit into a category where they could pattern match it to a productivity book, because it's not a productivity book. There's no tips or tricks on productivity.
No, it's just how to kind of exorcise yourself from the machine of thinking about that stuff. From a guy who was quite addled with that. I mean, he was really in it. I mean,
he and I would have an interesting conversation actually, because I have aspects of my personality that are that
we heard about the daily schedule,
daily routine, all of these things, and then the other side of me is oh my God, I don't want to do anything. I just want to spend time with my kid and, wander about all day.
Move closer to family aim and wander about all day. The flaneur in you comes out. Well, he is a great writer, and he wrote 2 questions for you.
Oh, boy.
Specifically, I emailed him. He first of all wanted me to thank you personally for supporting this book. 2 things. Number 1, I find especially as I get older, what I want to know about people's struggles, what they do when they're at their lowest, where they think they still have the furthest to progress in their lives. What domain of life do you find the hardest? And what area do you think you have the most to learn?
Empathy. Empathizing with people who aren't wired the same as me. And this has been my consistent struggle, I would say, over the last 15 years of my life. And one that I think I've made progress in, but that I still have a long way to go. You can tell from this conversation, I'm wired a certain way. My wiring is still the same wiring naturally as the crazy disciplined wake up at 3:45. I did that during college, waking up early in the morning, working as hard as I possibly can, not understanding when someone isn't willing to put in that energy or effort towards something. That is still how I am naturally wired. And so I tend to connect and get along really well with people who are wired that way. Like my neighbor, for instance, who I met recently, but who has become one of my closest friends in the world because we're wired the same way and we sync in everything we're doing.
How do you describe this
wiring? Just I don't know, maniacally disciplined. And I say maniacal because it sort of has a negative connotation.
No,
I think it's but I think
fastidiously.
I think that's the right word. Actually, is maniacal.
Okay.
It's I think it's it has a dark side to it. Where I will do dumb things. If I knew that I needed to get a run in one day and I didn't do it, and we get back at 10 p.m., I might go out and go run even though I'm sacrificing something else in my life. And so I still have that wiring. learning to have empathy for people who are not wired that way, and to be able to connect with them, relate with them, and also help them in whatever their journey is, has been a persistent struggle and source of relationship tension for me in my family, and my relationship with my wife, my relationship with certain friends along the way, etc.
Yeah. How so?
And my wife is not wired that way, as an example. She is extremely type A, like me, and very routine oriented, but not necessarily around the same exact things as me. And
I like her Twitter bio, by the way.
Yeah. Mostly just there to keep me in line.
Mostly here to keep Sahil Bloom in check.
Yeah, she does that at home too, which is great. So that, I mean,
the relationship tension you're talking about is because when people in your life that you connect with don't have that same wiring as you, that maniacal discipline as you. They either don't understand why I'm doing certain things, or I'm not able to communicate with them in the way that I should around things that they're struggling with, because my bias is like, well, just do it. If someone's disappointed with their kind of workout routine or how they look or what they're eating or whatever, my response naturally is like, well, just do it. What do you mean? I don't, even earlier I said it, right? I was like, losers don't go to the gym at 4:45 in the morning. Like, a young man recently asked me, told me he was unhappy with where he was in his career. He's like a 25-year-old kid, unhappy with where he is in his career. And he was like, what advice do you have for me? And I was like, get up at 5 and go to the gym for 30 minutes every single morning for the next 2 weeks. He was like, that has nothing to do with my career. What are you talking about? I was like, losers don't do that. You'll just find that you start winning if you're like you become the type of person that wakes up early and goes to the gym. You become the type of person that can do anything. And that's my belief. And I believe that. And he was like, well, it's hard. And I was like, no, it's not. Just set your alarm and get out of bed and do the thing. And that is a real fault that I have in my personality, because that is what I believe and that is what I would do. But not everyone is wired that way, and not everyone can just do that on a dime. You have to build into it, and you have to kind of work your way there with certain things. And so I am working on that actively, and I need to continue working on that. I really appreciate your vulnerability about it. I relate to a lot of this, by the way.
Yeah.
As you know, I wrote the happiness equation in Excel.
Yeah.
I wrote my book in Excel. I just happen to be a little older than you. That's all. But it's just easy. And the big thing for me, by the way, in all this stuff has just been reading more fiction. Yeah. That's been my ingredient. And still, Leslie and I will talk, and we'll talk about my empathy and my sometimes lack of empathy. Yeah. And for me, it's been starting. I'll just say starting to read fiction. Yeah. Picking up a book like East of Eden by John Steinbeck, or picking up a book, and just sort of feeling the feels of all these different people in different places is an empathy growing device. Yeah. To quote George Saunders, our guest in chapter 75. So that's one thing I'll just throw in the conversation. Second thing he wrote for you, a little longer. I also really want to know, this is Oliver speaking, I also really want to know, really is in all caps, I also really want to know how Sahil thinks about, quote unquote, holding the projections of other people, or whatever Jung would call it, i.e., how does he handle being seen as such an exemplar of the fulfilling and effective and meaningful life? In brackets, I found this very interesting to navigate because, on the one hand, I want to explain to people that I don't live the perfectly serene and non-anxious life, just ask my wife, but also, all caps, at the same time, one isn't actually doing a service to one's readers if you spend your whole time being too self-deprecating and saying, oh no, I have no idea what I'm actually really doing at all, etc. In some ways, you actually do need to be some kind of reflective surface for what they want to see in you. Mm-hmm.
I think about this a lot. I think it's a fantastic question. The way I think about what I put out into the world is that all of my content is informed by personal struggle, my own wrestling with anything that I'm dealing with on a daily basis, on a monthly basis, etc. I think on the whole, I do live a life that a lot of people would benefit from living. And I think that the principles of how I've gotten here and the principles and elements of how I live on a daily basis are really wonderful. I mean, I am as happy, healthy, and wealthy as I've ever been in my life. And it's been a real journey to get here, from being quite miserable and having like full-on panic attack and being deeply in a hole 2 years ago. And so the principles, I mean, it's what I'm trying to distill in my book. It's the principles and the frameworks that I've used to change my life and the unremarkable daily actions that I've taken that created a remarkable change over the course of that period are things that I do think people should try to embrace and embody. And so what I'm trying to do with my content is share those imperfections and how I've worked at making them slightly more perfect. And the whole is never going to be perfect. It's always a journey, and there's always struggle, and there's issues. And the empathy one, like, that's a great topic for me to write about, like embracing empathy as you're on your journey. And so it's finding those things that I feel like I am struggling with, and that I feel like have, created questions for me that I don't necessarily have figured out, and I don't have the answers, but I can help you ask better questions around them. That is really what I'm trying to do with my content. It's like, here is what my life looks like. Here are the things I'm struggling with. Here are the questions I'm asking myself that I'm wrestling with in order to improve. And here's how I think those questions can help you. I have never had a piece where I feel like I'm giving you all the answers for how to live your life and laying it out on a platter, because I don't know. I don't know the answers to that. There are certain things that I think I've figured out a bit, but I don't feel like I have the one-size-fits-all solution to what a happy life looks like. And that's the point that I'm going to get at in my book. It's like everyone needs to define on what their life by design looks like. I think these are the elements of it, and these are the types, and these are the ways that I think you can build these different types of wealth. But you need to figure out what the dimmer switches look like across all of them and how you can think about building it. And so that's really how I contend with it, is it's sharing your journey, sharing your own struggles. And if people like what they see as the whole, then that's great. I think it pulls people into the material more, because they do want to, embrace and drive towards the thing that they feel like you have. But doing so with a more of a question lens than an answer lens, I think is more welcoming.
Beautiful and wonderful, and so many things we could jump off of from there. I want to be conscious of time as well, since we're talking about a book on time. And so why don't we segue from here into the very closing fast money round questions just about books and reading. Okay, hardback, paperback, audio, or
I am a big believer in the book bundle. I am a huge supporter of authors, and any author that I have that I've mentioned a book from, I've probably bought the book in all formats. I have a Kindle. I buy because I travel with it, and so I always have all my books on Kindle. I buy audiobooks because I like to listen to different components of the book and see how they're narrated, and I'm like a student of kind of audiobooks. And then I will buy whichever one of the hardback or paperback is sort of the one on Amazon Prime at the moment.
So the fact that you have... Oh, I see. Whichever's on Prime. Gotcha.
Whatever gets it to me faster.
Right. Okay.
I prefer hardback books if I can get a hardcover.
Lends itself really nicely to the next question, which is, how do you organize your books? Because if you have them in so many formats, and you are a pretty organized and systemized kind of guy, how do you organize your books?
Yeah, I mean, I have a vision that someday I will have like a proper library in a house. I don't today. So I have like I would say 20 most impactful books are constantly out and somewhere in my view, so that I can like pick them up and look at certain pieces that have grabbed me in the past.
Okay.
And then any of the like 5 that I'm kind of currently looking at or reading will be out as well.
And of those 3 of the 20 we've talked about today, of the remaining 17, any titles come to mind that you just want to throw at people? Other impactful to you books?
Trying to think what else would jump out to me from those. I mean, I have the Daily Stoic out for sure, because I'll pop into it on a daily basis at any given point. I have I Will Teach You to Be Rich out, because I think it's a fantastic structure for a book and sort of a manual. I met Ramit for the first time the other day, and he's fantastic. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is particularly
There's something here about network that I haven't quite put a pin on, because a lot of people we've talked about, I can email Tim Ferriss, ask him to come on your podcast. James and I were talking. Ramit that I just met. There's something happening here about meeting interesting people that you seem to just do.
I really like people.
But you reach out to them online, you just DM them, or what's happening here on the networking side?
A big value driver of having a large platform is that it's easier to get in front and get in touch with people that would otherwise be
talk to them
somewhat
from your
inaccessible.
biggest platform.
That
Warren Buffett has
you
that
have
quote.
a friend that knows them at some point, so they're able to connect you. Like I think Ryan Holiday, I got connected by a common friend, so it was like via text intro, and that's much easier. And same, like I think Tim Ferriss and I think we're in like a WhatsApp group together, and so I just messaged him on the side, literally just to say I'm a great admirer and thank you for everything, because I feel like with a lot of this stuff, I feel like I genuinely am standing on the shoulders of giants, and Tim is one of those giants in my life. I've never had a at-length conversation with him, and so like a lot of this stuff that I said about how 4-Hour Workweek impacted my own life and trajectory is is new to him, I'm sure. And so I've always just found that if you are genuine with people and you
It's a large platform, though. That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Because Warren Buffett has that quote that the greatest thing about being wealthy is that I can meet interesting people.
Yeah.
I mean, he says that.
Anyone on command. Yeah. I mean, and it's an amazing... it's an amazing feature for sure.
So the 20 books are kind of sifting around the fact. What about tracking the books you've read? Do you do anything there? Are you like a Goodreads person?
I used to have Goodreads. So I used to. I'm a recovering one book a week guy. Like I read 100 books a year guy.
I know. I've heard you say that you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do that. That's what it's, again, informed by my own struggle and experience. I used to do that. Like my first newsletter actually was a newsletter where I would send out what I'm reading every month to originally a group of like 10 family and friends, and it grew to about 1,000 people just by like people sharing it with their family and friends.
That is what my email list actually is.
It's a great idea.
That's all I did. I copied Ryan.
But yeah, I basically I used to read nonstop as fast as I possibly could and just get through things. And what I realized at some point was that I was like retaining 1% of things that I consumed, and it was just a flex that I wanted to show how much I was reading. And that's stupid. That's dumb. It was vanity. It was insecurity. So I used to have Goodreads and I would track everything on there. Now I don't. I just, because honestly, like my reading is very different. I don't read from cover to cover in the way that I used to, where I was like, okay, I finished this book. I'm like popping in and out of things. I'm like opening the table of contents and I might jump to chapter 7.
Them, I'm like, it seems like.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm wandering a lot more with how I read. And that's how I enjoy it more. And it's,
you don't think social media has done that to you? Like, you don't think that's like
I think nonfiction books have done it to themselves, frankly. Like, I think a lot of nonfiction books now are meant to be wandered versus read end to end, or they're better consumed wandered, because you open the table of contents and you immediately know whether things are interesting to you or not in different sections. And I don't think you need to read most of them end to end. And it's sort of a shame of the book publishing industry in general. I mean, when I went out to market my book and met with a few agents, a handful of agents were like, this is too broad. You need to pick a single concept and write 200 pages on it. And I just kept saying, like, I don't want to do that. This is the idea. And I could probably do that and sell a bunch of copies of some book, but I don't want a book that people are going to come away from it and say that could have been a 10-page blog. I want to write a book. Which is
probably the biggest complaint of most nonfiction.
And I don't want to do that. I don't want to spend 2 years of my life writing something that people are going to say that about. I want to write something that every single chapter in there is necessary and that it is impactful to the whole. And so I would just say, I think that wandering is partially in response to how I feel like the industry has gone.
Yeah. Not all those who wander are lost. Do you have a favorite bookstore by chance, living or dead?
I would say Harvard, like the Coop at Harvard would be my favorite, just because I grew up around there and have spent time there.
For those that don't know, that's a really famous, like 2 or 3 story, both bookstore. Not to be confused with the Harvard bookstore on the other end of Harvard Square, but that's like got all the Harvard paraphernalia, but it's just a wonderful, entrancing, large book right in the throes of Harvard Square. Okay, great. And then just to close this off, it's been a wonderful conversation. It's been a long conversation. I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you being generous and sharing so much with us. Is there a final piece? You are a master at distilling wisdom. Is there a final piece of hard-fought wisdom or a bit of advice you'd like to close us off with today, to just have a final, byline on this conversation?
I think that the piece of advice I would give that applies to any phase of your life is to chase opportunity first and to chase energy later. I recently talked about this for the first time publicly, and it's something that's come more and more to mind for me as I've refined the idea. And what I mean by that is, like, early in your life, you have infinite energy, and you believe you have infinite time. And when you have infinite energy, you should chase every opportunity that comes your way and say yes to things and go and explore the map. Like you're the person on the video game map, sitting in the one light spot and it's all dark around you, and like say yes to everything and chase every opportunity to light up the map and to see what all is on the board. And then later, what you realize as you get older, as you and I, I'm sure, have realized, is that your energy becomes more and more finite, as does your time. And so you need to focus on saying no and on chasing the energy creating opportunities that allow you to go deep in one or two areas, that allow you to kind of explore where the gold is at that point. And I think that is the broadest way of thinking about the path for a life well lived. It's like explore early and sort of then exploit later.
Explore early, exploit later, chase opportunity first, chase energy later. Sahil Bloom, thank you so much for coming on 3 Books. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Hey everybody, it's just me, just Neil again, sitting on my basement brown couch back in Toronto, listening to the wonderful and wise Sahil Bloom. Preternaturally wise, that's the word I was looking for in the intro. Did you take a lot of notes? Did you write a lot of quotes down? There's a lot to talk about from this show. I wrote down a whole bunch of quotes. 1, 2, 3. Well, I'm only going to read 3 of them. I'll post more of them online, but here's 3 quotes. And 3books.co, by the way, you can always find all these quotes that I read. And we end up making little pretty boxes that we throw on social media, which I don't like, but we still do it. And here they are. Number 1, you'll find that you start winning if you become the type of person who wakes up early and goes to the gym. You become the type of person that can do anything. I don't know, it was 3-4 years ago, I was listening to an episode of The Knowledge Project, which is, of course, Shane Parrish's podcast. Shane Parrish, by the way, has a wonderful new book out called Clear Thinking, which I'll review in my book club this month. Okay, so if you want my book club, neil.blog, you can sign up. I send a list of every book I read this month in an email at the end of every month, last Saturday of the month. I've been doing that for 7 years now. But I was listening to an episode of The Knowledge Project from Shane Parrish, and he had Naval Ravikant on it. And Naval Ravikant said the number one thing he does in order to influence everything else he does, the lead domino of lead dominoes, was work out every day. And when I went to Ottawa to hang out with Shane, when I was on the Knowledge Project, he said he started doing that, and it's been life-changing. So I was like, I've always thought of myself as like a 3-time-a-week guy to the gym. And then for the last year or so, I've kind of moved myself up to 4. And, I let myself off the hook. If I only get 3, hey, that's still my goal. But then, I start hitting 4 1 week a month, and 2 weeks a month, and 3 weeks. And now this month, I just changed it to 5. Hey, like if I miss it, I'm still at 4. If I really miss it, I'm at 3, my old goal. But when I hit that 5, I really do feel it. And so the aspiration for me is getting to 7 or 6, like the Shane and Naval and Sahil types. But, hey, 5. I'm just saying. And by the way, I will say, sometimes what I do is like a 15-minute workout. Like it's just literally like a few push-ups, a few lunges, a few bicep curls, some abs. That's it. Done. 15 minutes. Done. But it changes the tenor of the whole day, because the whole day I get to think I went to the gym. Okay, my long, gigantic expansion of his tight and pithy quote. How about this one? I used to read nonstop as fast as I possibly could. I realized I was retaining 1% of 1% of things I consumed. It was just a flex that I wanted to show how much I was reading. And that's stupid. It was a vanity. It was insecurity. I'm wandering a lot more with how I read, and that's how I enjoy it more. Interesting. I used to read nonstop as fast as I could. I realized I was retaining 1%. This is interesting because I can't say that I flipped from one to the other in reading so intensely to, wandering, but I noticed that there is a tendency for people to say things like, how many books do you read a year, right? And even the number one most replied thing I get on my book club every month is, did you really read all these, or how'd you read all these? And I've decided I've invented Pasricha's law, okay? Dunbar's number, right? Avogadro's number. I got Pasricha's number. Here's my thing. It's my new thing. I'm trying it out. See what you think. Sahil, tell me what you think. It's the number of pages you have to read to say you read the book. And I mean read, not just like skim read or super read or whatever. I don't do that. So fiction, you got to read the whole story. It's the story you got to read. Forget the front matter, the back matter, the front of the book, the back of the book, the preface, the introduction, just forget all that. It's the story. If you read the story, you've read the book. What about nonfiction? Nonfiction is different. I think for nonfiction, you got to read all the front and back matter. I got this from Maria Popova, kind of the spirited person behind Brain Pickings, now the Marginalian, and she said that, she reads all the front and back matter first. And I realized with nonfiction, that's the way to go. You read the cover, right? Then you read the back cover. Then you read the front flap. Then you read the back flap. I mean, that's what I do. And then you read the introduction, table of contents, the index, the acknowledgments, the appendix, if there's one, the notes, like that, all that stuff, that gives you so much of the thrust of the book. Right? You just kind of feel like you already read it, even though if it's a 250-page book, you probably read 40 pages, but still, it's a lot. And then from there, I think you got to read a couple chapters. If there's 10 chapters in the book, maybe you read 2, maybe you read 1, maybe you read 4. With The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, I read all the front and back matter. It's a 525-page book, but there's about 200 pages front and back matter. So I read all that, and then I think of the 18 chapters, I read 11. Right? Some of them are on audio. Every single chapter of that book on audio is an hour, 45 minutes. So it's a super long walk. But I definitely feel like I read that book. So we're trying out Pasricha's number. We're exploring. We're going a little deeper on what Sahil was saying. What do you think? Give me a call, 1-833-READ-A-LOT. Drop me a line. Maybe I'll read it on the show. What do you think? What qualifies as reading the book, and how should we think about reading for posturing, ego, vanity, as Sahil says, and also for ourselves? Obviously, we prefer the latter, but where do you figure out what the balance is for you? All right. Here's a third quote. Chase opportunity first. Chase energy later. Early in your life, you have infinite energy and you believe you have infinite time. When you have infinite energy, you should chase every opportunity that comes your way. Say yes to everything. Then later, you realize your energy becomes more and more finite, as does your time. Then you need to focus on saying no and chasing the energy creating opportunities. Explore early, exploit later. There's a lot to unpack in that, but I just like the premise behind it. Chase opportunity first, chase energy later. I love it. Lots more quotes I pulled out. I won't read lots of them here, but we'll put them on 3books.co. As you know, we got the detailed show notes on there everywhere. He had lots of stuff, right? He's mentioning things like Athletic Greens, the sauna company, ice bath company. So all that stuff will be online at 3books.co. Handy little trick is obviously there's a guests button right at the top. You can click guests and just find any guest you want. And we got a phone call probably about 5 or 10 chapters ago with somebody saying, how do you link the guests with the books? It's because on the top 1,000, I have a list of all the books, and there's a little tiny numbers on the right side. You can click them and find out who the guest was. I don't link them together too strongly on purpose, so they're not in the show notes, right? I don't put the 3 books right on the cover or in the title, because I just think that I want the conversation to be the most important thing, right? That's kind of what I'm thinking. So what are Sahil Bloom's 3 most formative books? 3 more books to add to the top 1,000. Everybody, here we go. Number 623, we have The 4-Hour Workweek by Timothy Ferriss, or Tim Ferriss for short. Number 622, The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari by Robin Sharma. And number 621, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. By the way, I'd love to have all 3 of those people, all 3 of those guys, as it were, in this case, on the show. If you have a connection, let me know. Give me a call. Drop me a line. Oliver Burkeman's already said yes, actually. It's just we're trying to figure out time and place. He said yes, but then he moved to England. And then I was waiting to go to England. And then I haven't been to England. So now we're just trying to find a time when he's next in Canada or New York or somewhere. But it would be great to kind of keep going down this self-help path. I don't want to spend, I don't want to veer the show there sideways, because I want to keep exploring, fiction. We've got some wonderful guests coming, like Susan Orlean. Thanks, Bo Boswell, longtime listener who helped spring the library book upon us. Anyway, that's a tease for that one's coming. 3 books added to our top 1,000. We're at 621 already. Thank you so much to Sahil Bloom for coming on the show. It's been a real treat and a real pleasure. Are you still here? Did you make it past the 3-second pause? If so, Welcome back to the end of the podcast club. It's where I talk directly to you. You talk directly to me. We just hang out. It's an after party. If you're on a long drive in a basement gym in Mongolia, just going for a long walk with your dog, we get to hang out. This is a hangout time. We always kick off the end of the podcast club by playing a voicemail from the three bookers out there, three books community. 1-833-READ-A-LOT is the number. Give me a call if you're not sure if you should. Do it. Let me know a formative book, a dream guest, anything. I love hearing from you. 1-833-READ-A-LOT, READALOT. And with that, let's go to the phones now.
Hey, Neil. This is Adriana Flores calling from San Antonio, Texas, and I am a former librarian. Now I help run my family's music store in San Antonio, Texas. And I tell everybody I possibly can about your podcast because I think it's the most amazing thing ever for me as a librarian who doesn't get to work in the library anymore, but absolutely love just browsing the library shelves. I still use the library all the time. I put books on hold. I have a great public library system here in San Antonio. You can request a book from any branch and it'll be sent to your closest branch to pick it up. And then I always go and browse the new books, and that is how I found your book, your newest book. I was just browsing in the library shelves, and I was like, oh, this looks awesome. And I went home, and I looked at it, and then I started looking for your podcast and heard your interview on other people's podcasts. Anyway, I just thank you for the work you're doing. It's inspiring me every day, and I do share verbally with everyone about your podcast because I think it's fantastic. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you do. Bye.
Aw, thank you so much, Adriana from San Antonio. That's a beautiful and kind and loving voice. I love San Antonio. By the way, so many reasons down there in that nice Texas heat, that little river going through town. I actually went to a place down there recently called the Warbler Sanctuary. I think I'm getting that name right. If you're a birder or an aspiring birder, there's a place I think it's called the Warbler Sanctuary in San Antonio, which is essentially these very kind, nice people's like farm in San Antonio. And if you like email them in advance, they give you the code to their own fence. Yeah, that's right. Warbler Woods Bird Sanctuary. And they just basically made a nature preserve and you can go and look at birds, which is wonderful, which is very kind of them. And also when I think San Antonio, I also think of Nowhere Bookshop, of course. Jenny Lawson's Bookshop. Jenny Lawson was our guest. Anybody know the number? Anybody know the number? The number is on chapter 76. She was our guest. She did it not from the bookstore, but from under her desk, as you recall, in her pajamas. Love Jenny. And when our book of also came out, which is the most recent book you're probably talking about, in December 2022, Jenny was honestly, when you have like lots of books, people think, oh, it's easy to get press, it's easy to get coverage. Actually, it's the exact opposite. When you're not new, it's actually harder. Like if it's your 10th book, it's actually harder. People are like, well, oh, it's that old guy again. And it was hard for me. Like, we got some great coverage and we had a big NPR hit and we were in Maria Shriver's Sunday paper and all this stuff. But a lot of things that we thought we would land didn't pan out, which these days, to make your book come through the noise, you need everything. You just do. You need to be on like all the huge podcasts, all the big shows, or you're like nowhere because there's just, over 3,000 books are published in English every single week. Okay. That'd be more than 5,000 actually. I know it's over 1 million a year, so I can't. Yeah, exactly. It's more than 3,000 a week, right? But Jenny Lawson just came out of nowhere. She wrote this huge, giant, epic blog post on theblogs.com, which is her wonderful blog. Like, shout out to blogs that continue. Shout out to postsecret.com. Shout out to blogs that like continue, that persevere. And the blog post got like, I want to say like 600 or 700 comments with people submitting their own awesome things. I wish it was pre-publication of our book of awesome because then I would put a lot of those in the book. But it was unbelievable, like this sort of spirited community that she just always galvanizes. A Nowhere Bookshop down in San Antonio, in addition to the San Antonio Library, of course. Thank you so much for the wonderful phone call. As always, Adriana, if I play your call, email me with your address and I will drop you a line and mail you a signed book of your choice. And now, we had a little review at the beginning, but now let's do the letter of the chapter. And this chapter's letter comes from Ben Andrews. Ben has given me permission to read you his letter, which starts like this. Growing up in Portland, my mom cleaned houses and my dad made cans, fruit, tuna, etc. And they weren't killing it financially, but we had a lot of love. Together, they made around $45,000 a year. My mom and dad wanted to take my brother and I on a vacation that didn't require us crashing with family who were scattered around, so my mom got her real estate license. She talked her only clients out of buying their first home, telling them they didn't have enough in savings and it would cause too much stress on their upcoming nuptials. Build a stronger foundation of love with less stress, she said, and let's talk about real estate in a year. In front of 60 other realtors in the office, the owner of the real estate company gave her a box of cleaning supplies and told her she was more cut out for cleaning toilets than selling the houses they were in. She was fired. A couple years later, and shortly after that, I turned 18. I was arrested, and I was facing a 5 to 15-year prison sentence. My public defender suggested I plead to a lesser charge and assured me that if I took the plea, I wouldn't have to spend longer than a few years in prison. My mom no longer wanted to make some money to take us on vacation. She now had a why. She needed to make money to pay for a proper attorney. Not that it's about the money, but she did make $125,000 in the next 5 months. And for a family that used to making $45,000 a year, that changed my family's financial situation forever. And I was able to look for new counsel. I didn't go to prison. I did attend the University of Oregon on an athletic scholarship, and as awesome as that was, I was broken and ashamed of accusations that stunted my development as an athlete and, more importantly, as someone entering adulthood. After college, a complete stranger sent me a contract to send me $250,000 in exchange for me to quit my job and train as hard and smart as I could for the 2004 Olympic Games. I didn't make the Olympics, but over those 4 years training for them, this man and I talked on the phone every Tuesday as he mentored me in life and business. I finally got to meet him in person after our contract was up. It was an incredible meeting, mainly because he was so incredibly normal. After I retired from professional running, I got into the real estate business with my family, and I started chasing internet leads. It didn't work very well, and my parents introduced me to Buffini and Company. More on that here, and then he links over to a video. I have been going to Mastermind, Peak Experience, and other Buffini events for 17 years. I have been in their coaching program since 2012. Over the years, I have shared the experiences of these speakers with my wife and my son Henry and felt this year was the year he should go and bring a friend. His best friend and teammate were excited to hear Bo Eason, but as the event drew nearer, they talked more and more about the happiness part and ultimately you. The last several weeks, I've heard them talk about little things that are just totally awesome, and it's done a number on me too. We are all more aware of the beauty around us. They thought it was cool to hear the NFL guy, but as they both want to play in the NFL, but it was your message that they took with them out of the event. Last night, after the event, we played wiffle ball in front of the hotel for about an hour. We went to dinner, and to my surprise, these two 12-year-old boys wanted to talk about their favorite speakers, why they liked them, and what their takeaways were. They talked about their teammates. They could be leaders on the team just by being happier, understanding that happiness is theirs if they want it. Happiness is a choice if you talk to yourself nicely. Over dinner, we talked about rose, thorn, bud. Over breakfast this morning, they discussed what they were letting go of, what they are grateful for, and what they will focus on. Conversations I didn't anticipate hearing this week. It's true, more is caught than taught, and let me tell you, Neil, whatever you were throwing at them, they caught. They are both going out to get copies of 2 Minute Mornings. They are pumped. Thank you so much. I read your book in 2018. It gave me permission to write my own story, which is called The Long Run, Lessons in Perseverance in Running Business and Life. Reading about your divorce, in brackets, been there, I was no longer ashamed of being accused of a crime, arrested, and being emotionally crippled by that experience. My story is about finding the resilience I didn't know I had, how others helped me find happiness in the darkness, how normal people going about their normal days, doing normal things, can change your life forever. Thank you so much for your influence on my son Henry and his friend Devin. I'm forever grateful for that. With gratitude, Ben Andrews. I'm completely blown away. What a stunning story. I'm so deeply grateful for you for sharing it with me. For those that don't know, I have done a number of speaking events for Buffini over the last few years, and this August I spoke to 2,000 people down in Carlsbad, California, which is where Ben, he was sitting 2 down from me. I didn't know who he was. He was sitting 2 down from me, and before I went on stage, he looked at me, tapped me on the shoulder, and he said, my two sons came to hear you speak, and I didn't know who this guy was, and I went and gave my speech. And then that night I got this letter, and it was touching, and it was too long to read at the beginning of the show, but I asked him if I could read it at the end, and he said yeah. So I wanted to share it with all of you. Who knows which parts of that story might touch or connect with different people in different ways. Like when I cried at the end there, it's like, I can't anticipate what parts I'm going to cry at. Like, who knows? But hopefully there was something in there that just touched the cockles of your heart the way it touched mine. Thank you so much, Ben Andrews. And I will definitely be mailing you a couple copies of 2 Minute Mornings for that grateful message. That's very nice of you. Thank you so much, Ben. All right. And now it is time for the word of the chapter. And as we always do, let's go back to our guest, Mr. Sahil Bloom, now.
I don't know, maniacally disciplined.
Yes, indeed. We're going to go with maniacally disciplined. A lot to choose from. I was wondering about going with heuristic, maybe. Zeitgeist. Dystopian. Juxtapose. Lots of big words from the Stanford grad. But maniacally disciplined is interesting. Just the way he combined those. And I challenged him. I was like, oh, yeah, not maniacally, whatever. And he's like, no, I think that is the right word. I appreciate he said that. Discipline is maybe a bit more obvious.
Discipline.
To gain control by enforcing obedience or order. Orderly or prescribed conduct or pattern of behavior. Or C, self-control. But B, he's really talking about orderly, prescribed conduct or pattern of behavior. But what about on the maniacal side? Maniacally?
Maniacal.
Maniacal?
Maniacal.
M-A-N-I-A-C-A-L, an adjective, which according to Merriam-Webster means, number one, affected with or suggestive of madness, like maniacal laughter, maniacal energy, a maniacal killer. Or two, characterized by ungovernable excitement or frenzy, also known as frantic, like a maniacal mob or maniacal fans. Interesting word, affected with or suggestive of madness. Where did it come from? Well, in 14th century French, there was a word maniaque, M-A-N-I-A-Q-U-E, which meant approximately affected with mania, raving with madness. It might come from the ancient Greek word maniakos, M-A-N-I-A-K-O-S, as a lot of words do, coming from mania, pertaining to mania. What about mania? There's other words like megalomania and kleptomania, but mania basically means mental derangement characterized by excitement and delusion, from the Latin mania, meaning insanity or madness. A lot of things trace all the way back to Latin or Greek, and these do. It comes from mania. That word in our culture is, kind of like bad up, you might want to say. But now we have maniacal, and then if you attach it to the disciplined, I'm going to put these together. This is the phrase: you're maniacally disciplined. You're gaining control to a prescribed conduct with a type of degree of suggestive madness. There's a lot of suggestive madness in Sahil Bloom, a lot of suggestive madness in Neil Pasricha, a lot of suggestive madness in you, our beloved three bookers, and this wonderful community. Why are we releasing a show on the lunar calendar? Why is it all about books? I mean, we are being nuts together. That's what we're doing. We are being maniacally disciplined together. We're having a lot of fun doing it, and it's been a blast so far. Thank you guys so much for listening to yet another chapter of 3 books. I really appreciate hanging out with you on chapter 129. Stay tuned on the next full moon for chapter 130 with the one and only Ralph Nader. Almost 90-year-old Ralph Nader called me up and said, can I come on 3 books? And I was like, heck yeah. So we're going to be hanging out with Ralph in November. Get ready for that. And until next time, everybody, remember that you are what you eat and you are what you read. Keep turning that page, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.